Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge. It's a sidecast to our main podcast where instead of looking at a movie 1 minute at a time, we get a chance to meet some cool people and talk about their life one moment at a time. I'm your host. I'm Alan Sanders.
I'm your co-host, Walt Murray.
Walt, I cannot believe we are in our penultimate episode. We only have one more to record after this. It'll come out just before Christmas. This one comes out about a week before, full week before the holiday. I can't believe how fast 2021 has disappeared compared to 2020.
It has flown. 2020 just
it sucked.
It couldn't end soon enough, and it felt like it was never going to go away. And 2021 has just flown by. I mean, I can't believe we're in December.
So, what have you been doing all your Christmas shopping? I know being the single dad now, you got 3 girls.
All 3 of them have asked for money. So,
well, that's easy.
I'm trying to find that.
You're going to gift wrap it or are you trying to find it?
I think I'm just handing it to them in bags. I don't know how they want it. I don't think the delivery is the issue. I think it's just getting the cash.
You don't have like the wallet like I do. It's got the revolving door, like the money comes in on one side and immediately goes right out the other side.
No, I don't even bother to put it in my wallet. It's gone. I just hand it to them as they walk by.
Just bill collectors are already lined up. There you go. Here you go. Here you go.
See you when the money runs out.
See you in 15 days. Get paid again.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, the thing is, I'm lucky. My wife, because I got 4 girls, you got 3 girls. My girls know how to put lists together, as opposed to me, who waits the last second and they can't figure out why nobody knows what to get me for anything. But my wife forced us a few years ago to start using the Amazon list to at least put something out there. Everyone can look at it. You can choose to buy right off the list or go, well, he wants this, but I can find a cheaper version of it, depending, who you have in your family and how, their shopping habits.
Yeah, I've had all 3 of them add stuff to my cart already. So I think they almost think that it's going to get bought by accident.
No, wait a minute. They put stuff in your cart.
Mm-hmm.
So they would hope that you would hit checkout.
Makes it easy for me. I just check out every week or 2 and
that is sneaky as shit.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, $74 for Bill O'Reilly's book. What the hell?
That's a hell of a surcharge. I didn't realize they were going after him that hard.
Yeah, then I'm like, who did I buy this for Christmas for?
Oh, no, my wife on the flip side, she does all the ordering. She does almost like 99% of the wrapping. The only thing I have to deal with is stuff that I buy for her. She takes care of all the kids, all the dogs, all of our friends, all of our family. Anytime I feel like I should complain, I have to remind myself once a year, she's doing the one thing that I would just do anything to avoid. So she's doing it.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. Well, and I think this year the bar for the girls is really low because they're kind of like, it's just dad shopping. So
it's dad by himself.
This is going to be a train wreck. And
Dad, just gift card. Just gift card, please. Just
gift cards, cash. Cash works.
I'm making light, but you are going through you've gone through some stuff this year. You lost your mom at the beginning of the year.
Well, that was actually last year.
Oh my God, it was last year.
Yeah. So I've had, I've gone through that.
Well, so in 2 years' time, well, it's been I guess it has been, because it was the beginning of 2020, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. It was actually I left to go see my mom the day after the governor shut Georgia down. So I left the house not knowing if there were going to be gas stations open, restaurants, places to go to the bathroom other than a bridge. And, went down as fast as I could to Brunswick. And then my mom passed away that Friday. So, yeah. So basically from that moment through now, my life has been a crazy ride.
I'm just happy that you're with me on this, because every time I look at how I think my life is just crap, I go look at you and I go, oh, it could be worse.
Oh, it could be worse. Yeah, it could be worse. So
I say that lovingly, right?
I'm kind of like that that poster, the takeoff on the inspirational posters where the ship's hull is sticking out of the ocean, and it says, some people's lives are just meant to serve as an example to others.
Right. That is exactly. I have that saying. I tell my kids, I'm like, look, you're never truly useless. You can always serve as a bad example.
That's exactly right. That's what I try to do.
Well, you were doing a good job, sir.
Well, thank you.
Well done.
Every comedian that I've ever talked to is like, you get to that point where you're like, okay, I've had enough tragedy in my life that I can now be a stand-up. And I think I've gotten there.
You are. Didn't you try stand-up though?
Okay. So I was actually asked and scheduled to do stand-up at a club here in Atlanta.
Right.
And then everything got shut down by COVID.
Okay. So that's funny. That's comedy right there.
COVID, you son of a bitch.
You were scheduled to go on stage, open mic, and COVID stopped you.
and everything shut down because of COVID. So,
oh my God, you can't write that.
So thanks, China.
In a movie, people are like, oh no, that would never happen.
Oh no,
thanks, China.
No. So it's been a hell of a 24 months.
Yeah, it's been a little strange. You know what though? This year has been a little bit better. I know you've had to deal with separation, and although you're far enough along, you didn't have to have the custody battles and all that crap that I had to do.
Oh yeah,
I got
I didn't have any of that stuff. No,
that's you have no idea just how much turmoil that puts on you.
Oh no, I mean, as a private investigator, I get to see it up close and personal. So
but
I was real thankful that I didn't have to go through all that mess.
That's awesome. Well, we're moving through the end of the year, and I don't want to belabor bad things, although you and I have at least a sense of humor. We're Gen Xers. We actually get to laugh at things. We actually find humor in things, and we don't go around trying to figure out how to shut people down, cancel them, or try to get them fired or whatever. We just like whatever.
Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah, mind my own business, and whatever people do, that's up to them.
All right. Well, before we get to our guests, because we've just kind of been catching up over the last week. Anything else going on this week that we need to chat about?
Oh man, every week there's weird stuff, crazy stuff going on. No, I mean, I'm really looking forward to our guest tonight. And I know a lot of our listeners are too. And so I'll let you do the honors since you're the one who knows him the best, but I have been a fan of Eric for a long, long time. So I'm really looking forward to
say know me the best. I think we both know him equally, because when you're on radio, and as long as Eric has, you learn about people because they reveal things over time. They tell you stories of growing up. They tell you about how they think about things today, how they thought about things yesterday. They tell you their life experiences growing up. I mean, at some point, you just kind of feel like you know people. And I think that's the magic of radio.
Well, I think with Eric, he is enough of an enigma, and I think he plays his cards pretty close. I mean, we do know some things about him, but I'm hoping that sometime in this interview, he'll say, damn, I can't believe I'm telling y'all this stuff, just like some of our other guests have. So I feel like I know him somewhat, but I don't think I really do. So I'm looking forward to this interview.
All right. Enough dilly-dallying. Let's go ahead and part the curtain. Bring him up from the green room. You've seen the title card. You know what this episode is all about. So let's go ahead and welcome to our stage, Eric Von Haessler. Eric, welcome.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. I'm a little bit nervous, I have to say. I'm a little bit nervous.
Now, why would, okay, I heard you a couple of times when Tim and Autumn, who have been on our show, part of your Von Haessler Doctrine, the show that you currently have on WSB, I heard you talk about it a couple of times and say, what do I say? What do we talk about? Like, it's easy.
Well, no, I know what it is. He's nervous about what this is going to do to his career.
Oh, well, yeah. There is that.
Yeah, when you're the host of a show, if you blow it, you have yourself to, it's your show, you put your name on it, but I don't want to come in and screw up somebody else's show. So that's what I get.
Oh, you can't. About. There's no way.
You've obviously never listened.
This is a damn train wreck, Eric.
All right, then I'm right at home.
You're good.
I'm glad to be here. It's fun. And I hope that I say something that I hope I say exactly what you just said. I never thought I'd say this, but actually I'm very, I'm kind of an open book, I feel like, but on the other hand, we all have a side of ourselves that we keep to ourselves, but I'm willing to give you, 80% of the reality of my brain.
We'll take it.
It'll triple the size of this brain on this side of the co-host. Eric, before we get into the Wayback Machine, one of the things I mentioned as you came on is in radio, you kind of can't help it, especially if it's talk. You do kind of have to be real with your audience, and they do tend to start feeling like they know you. And I think that's just part of the business.
Yeah, I think that's really the key to doing a show that's going to have any chance of, getting an audience. In radio, it's more than an audience. They really connect with you. It's still the warmest medium where people feel like they know. People love to watch Seinfeld, but they don't feel like they know him. Radio is a different, kind of animal. And that connection, the more organic you are, the more you use your own life and your own real thoughts, I think the better shot you have of getting a real committed audience. That's the first thing, that they're committed. And then after that they grow. I think you have a better shot of doing that. The more reality that you bring to it. Me and my old partner used to always say, good radio is real life with all the boring parts cut out. So you can kind of get to people, and it all comes down to, it's kind of an artful description that anything that's really good kind of hits on the human condition, because and you can come in from a different point of view, because things are niched out now to the point where, if you like this, you never listen to that. We're all in kind of silos, but the real truth is that there are certain things that just living and breathing and being a human being, people share throughout, not just now, but that's why Shakespeare still works. The reason Shakespeare still works is because that kind of stuff happens in the office, that kind of intrigue and everything. And we're not in royal courts or anything, but that dude, if it was him, I don't know, I hear maybe it was somebody else, but whoever wrote those plays, that's what they were hitting on. They were hitting on that thing about being human. And I'm not comparing talk radio to Shakespeare, but it's the same thing. It's the same thing. The more organic you are, the better shot that you have. And I feel like sometimes I think it takes a long time. You can know that intellectually, but you need flying time to really feel that and experience that. It's hard to do. It's hard to reveal yourself to an audience of strangers. It takes time. And a lot of bad radio, I feel like, and by that, I don't mean the people are bad. I mean, the product's not as good as it could be, is when people sort of adopt the persona of somebody else that they've heard, right? Which is okay in the beginning. It's okay in the beginning for you because you're still finding your legs or whatever. But I think that's, I come out of kind of a shock jock rock and roll radio. And I think that's part of what killed that, is you just had too many shows that were trying to sound like their favorite show. And you didn't get a lot of originality. Originality comes from yourself and your life and, how you're dealing with the things around you.
Well, and I think there's been the evolution of the talk side, and depending on which side of the talk you've got, the shock jock versus the political talk. And now there's sort of this shift toward entertainment, yet still try to be informative. What I found is if you're always honest, which sometimes means you're exposing yourself, you can't help it. You're exposing your ideas, your thoughts, your history, your relationships. You never have to think about what did I say last year or the year before that. And it makes you much more consistent. And I think that keeps that audience feeling like you are real.
Yeah. Well, if the role that you're playing is yourself, it's easy to remember what that is. If you're trying to be somebody else, then that's when you have to kind of go, oh, where does that person that I pretend to be, where did he stand on that a couple of years ago? So yeah, it actually comes down to laziness. It's easier just to be yourself.
Well, and Eric, there was something last week on your show, and I can't remember now what the topic was, but somebody had called in and said, well, you used to say this, but now you're saying that. And I remember you saying, well, you know what? I've evolved on that issue.
Yeah.
And I think that's a part of it too, is that the honesty that you brought to it was, hey, I used to have this opinion, but I've kind of thought it through. I've played it out in real life and it doesn't work. Yeah. And so now here's where I am.
I think go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that authenticity that you bring to it, I think is really
some of that, and you got to be honest. But the thing is, you don't want to be doing that with everything, right? Because then people will be like, well, this guy doesn't know where he stands on anything. I think the thing that you are maybe thinking of is the guy who I used to be one of those people who said, if you don't vote, you don't have a right to complain.
Yeah, that was
and then in the last election, I didn't vote. And I thought that was going to be just a one-time thing. And I kind of took to it, because I want the audience. I really do want the audience of the von Haessler Doctrine. They can love it. They can dislike it. They can think it's funny or think it's not funny, but I do want them to know that I don't have an ulterior motive. I'm not trying to get them to vote for this candidate or that candidate. But at the same time, I don't want to have a vanilla show. I want to be able to tell you my opinions and deconstruct things. And after I didn't vote the last time, I thought, that's the host can tell you he's not trying to move you in a certain direction, but you don't know. You don't know who that host is voting for. I mean, you have, but it is public record whether or not you vote. So I thought, like, if I don't vote, then if people want to check, then it will become obvious to them. If this guy was going to move heaven and earth to con me into a position, you at least think he would take the time to go vote. So if he's not going to vote, I just want there to be a place in this, what I consider insane sort of debating. It's not even debating, this screaming and hollering that's going on.
Yeah.
And that's where that's again, going back to who I am organically. I just started to think, you know what? I did my part. I voted from the age of 20 to however old I was in 2016, 54 or whatever. I did that. I've done my part. Now my lane is different. I want to be an off ramp for people to decompress every once in a while, but still enjoy themselves and also still be informed to a certain degree. I guess it is a little bit of that infotainment thing, but the problem with so much infotainment is they're trying to please everybody. It's a weird thing. I'm trying to please myself at all times, and I'm hoping that people come along for the ride, But Alan, it doesn't matter how genuine you are, people will call in or whatever and say, "Oh, you're making that up," or "You drank this Kool-Aid or that Kool-Aid." You got both sides say you drank the Kool-Aid. What the hell does that mean? I mean, it's impossible to have a good political debate anymore. So I've just decided, I'm kind of out of that business. It's not like there's a lack of it. It's not like people can't find it in a million different places. I think it's important when I'm going through prep in the morning and the afternoon, I really do the best I can to get rid of the low-hanging fruit. And the low-hanging fruit sometimes is the biggest story of the day. Not always. Sometimes the low-hanging fruit is that oddball story, that everybody will pick up on. It's important to remember that there's a million things to talk about in the world every day. And we've all become conditioned, I think, between social media and the 24-hour news networks and talk radio to believe that these are the 8 things everybody's talking about. You look at a CNN or Fox News. It's kind of odd to me that the panel show at 9:00 are talking about the same 5 or 6 issues that the panel show at 5:00 is. And that's just not natural to me. It's just not natural to me. And who's serving that up? Washington Post or New York Times, or who's serving up these 8 topics that we're all supposed to talk about every day? So, I figure that people can find that where they want it. And if I have something genuine to say on things, I will, but I don't want to have a show where people think I'm trying to get them to change their behavior. I mean, who the hell am I? Like, who am I to try to get you to vote in some kind of way,
But now let me play devil's advocate. I would argue that part of our role in hosting a show and talking about things is we're supposed to believe that we have got an informed opinion worth listening to. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have to believe. And I had this, the great Pete Spriggs, who retired from WSB. It was the most eye-opening lunch I ever had sitting down with him, because I'm sitting there talking to him. We're talking about, what do we want to do with this? And how about this? And then all of a sudden he looks me right in the eye and he goes, "Do you have an ego?" I was like, "Oh shit, that's like a bad thing, right? Like, I don't want to say I have an ego. Like, so no, I'm a team player. I love working with the team. I'm just a cog in the wheel." And he was like, "No, do you have an ego?" I was like, "I don't know what you mean." He said, "Do you believe you're worth listening to?" And I was like, "Oh wow, I never thought of it that way. I believed I had, but I never put that word together with it." And it steered me in a different direction to say, you know what? I have the privilege of being on air with these people. I want to do my absolute best to bring my A game, because I do believe I have something worth listening to.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that's why I say I have to always look at the other side of it, which is don't become frivolous. Don't become vanilla. still have to talk about things that if things are important to me, and usually I like to try to, toss things into the area of humor or whatever. And as long as it's real and it still has to be impactful, the way a political opinion can be. I agree with you. I guess what I'm saying is I know that there is the Alan Sanders show, and I know that there is the Eric Erickson show, and there are all these shows. So there is, if people want to go deep dive into that, there's plenty of places to do that. And then people have their favorite hosts, right, who give that to them and stuff. Just for me right now, I'll put it this way, and I've said this a couple of times on the show. In my mind, the political debate in this nation, let's just take it to like social media, because I think so much of it is sourced in attitude and everything out of the way that social media sort of changed that debate. To me, I'm not on Twitter. The show is on Facebook, but Jared just puts up stuff. I don't ever engage on social media. I stopped about 2 years ago. I don't watch any 24-hour news networks. I stopped that about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. To me, social media, Twitter, it's as if I'm walking down the street and I see a group of people on the other side of the street and they're just throwing shoes at each other. And so as I'm walking by, I'm thinking, do I want to go over there and start throwing shoes around with these people? And no, the answer is no, I don't. And the reason that I say that is there's never resolution. There's never resolution. You can think that you type into your keyboard the most rational, logical, mic dropping thing, and it just gets eaten up by the machine, and 85 people call you this, and the other 85 people tell you you're great. And it's just, it never stops. And because it never stops, it's not satisfying for me. It's just not satisfying. And I know, and people, I've gotten to the point where I just don't even want to look at it anymore. And when you go back to, being who you are and true to yourself, then that's another thing that I have to do, because if I jumped in there, I wouldn't be true to myself, because I don't think that there's anything to learn on social media. I think it's killing the world. I have to be honest with you. I love stuff like this, and I watch YouTube, and I don't hardly watch any television really that isn't live sports. I watch little niche YouTube channels, somebody unboxing some new Beatles thing or whatever. This is the stuff that I find, entertaining. And so I don't hate everything that the internet has brought or whatever, but I do think that the 24-hour cycle of news is killing us. It's just killing us. We're not allowed to have any moments. You remember, like in the past, we're all men of certain age. Me, I'm certainly probably older than anybody, but in the past, before the internet, in politics,
we're all Gen X.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm actually the last year of the boomers, 1964.
Are you really? Are you the scraping it?
We'll
call you on the cusp.
Right,
you're the cusp.
The cusp to whatever the next thing was after the boomers.
Well, I am just past boomer. So is Walt. I think Walt, we're both just inside boomer.
Yeah,
not boomer. Gen X.
Yeah, I came. You showed me some respect. I came about a year or two earlier, and but the old days, the way that it used to be, the old days, is you would, like 3 months before a national election, things would get out of control and people would start yelling at each other, and you'd have finger pointing, and this one's Hitler and the other one's devil, whatever. But it was like a season. And then the election would happen. And then there would be these, like, the couple of years of just governance. It's like, okay, well, that's the way the die is cast. You have this many these, this many those, and I'll get another shot. And those talking points that are made available to everybody for those 3 months earlier, those were insiders. They had the talking points. They had to get on TV. They had to get on all these shows and try to get their talking points out. Now we have talking points that are made available to anyone who's declared themselves on any side every 24 hours. All they have to do is go to social media. Okay, issue. C-list celebrity says this. Okay, what are we saying back to that? And then boom, there's your talking points. This was my epiphany. I don't care what actors think. Truly. And when you truly don't care what actors think, you have no interest in responding to them. We've all been kind of juiced into this thing where, I've got to respond to some actor. I don't know. It's a C-list actor. and maybe they'll say something that I completely disagree with, but maybe I still think that they were great playing a cop in that movie. Like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hold on to that.
Yeah. One time, Eric, back in the regular guys days, one morning, y'all were talking about something that was going on, and some musician said some idiotic thing. And you said, if I based my listening on the political opinions of every musician, I would never listen to music. And I was like, that is exactly right, because there is no way that most of the music I listen to, those guys agree with anything that I believe.
Yeah, only Rush ever made concept albums based on Ayn Rand. So that's it.
Yes, that is exactly right. Exactly right.
And then Ted Nugent might punch me in the face anyway. So,
Yeah, and that always resonated with me, because I was like, I can't become so myopic that I cut half 3/4 of the world out because they don't agree with my minute opinion.
Isn't that the difference between our Gen X, maybe back end boomers, where we understood we weren't going to be 100% lockstep with everybody on everything? How boring would that be? We can actually say, I like your acting, I don't like your politics. I like your album, but I'm not going to march with you. We can't do that today. And that's actually that. I don't know if it's social media that's done it, or if it's not keeping score back in the 90s, or the political correctness movement going on overdrive to create this wokeness that now woke is considered a bad term.
Well, and thanks to 24-hour news and social media, you can't buy windshield wipers from somebody who disagrees with you. So it's insane.
It just feels like at some point it's got to snap back. I keep waiting for the pendulum to swing the other way and people start going again. You know what? I don't care. I don't care anymore. Whatever. But
I think it started to. I think it started to in the last election in Virginia, which I think what's really happening in this country, and I don't think it's idealistic, and I think the Republicans can fumble this ball major league before we get to next year. By politicians have a great way of misunderstanding why they win more than why they lose. They have this amazing misunderstanding. I believe that when you look at that kind of thing, what happened in Virginia, I think that people in this country hate all of this wokeness. Black people, Asian people, white people, every kind of people, most people in every demographic, maybe if you get below 23 or something, maybe not, but everything above that, people hate. They hate the idea that they have to measure their words. They hate this idea of canceling comedians, but they don't have the power. Nobody wants to be the first one to stick their neck out. But when you walk into a voting booth, that's a different thing. And you can kind of wipe that stuff back. Now, that's a generalization, but I think that overall, people do not like this idea that they can't speak their minds. And now the other side of that, I'm getting more political here than I do on my show, is I think that all the Republicans, if they are going to go hardcore on the culture thing and everything, they could fumble this ball. Because you know what the Republicans need right now? They need somebody, maybe a governor of a Midwestern state that nobody's heard of their name, but they just have a resume of competence, and they will pledge to lead from the center right and go in that direction. Because the only thing that can make this woke thing come back up is if we dredge up and continue to have this ridiculous argument over the last 5 years, which nobody wins on. Look, Trump got it, misunderstood why he got it, fumbled the ball. Biden got in there. He's already misunderstood why, Trump won because he wasn't Hillary, and he thought he won because everybody thought he was the greatest thing that ever lived. And then Biden won because he wasn't Trump. And they get in there like, oh, yeah, we're just going to change let's transform the entire country. A little humility. If we could get like a Midwestern governor or somebody with a little bit of humility who just says, listen, we're going to get the economy going. We're going to allow people to be themselves. And we're going to get out of this, ridiculous mentality. We've got to get rid of people on both sides are just involved in this sort of political hero worship right now, whether it's AOC on one side. I always use AOC and Marjorie Taylor Greene and try to explain to people, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. I was a shock jock. I get it. I understand when you do things that get headlines that boost your brand. And that in and of itself, maybe there's nothing wrong with it, but not for nothing. When you get to the House of Representatives, you're supposed to consider yourself like in an august body, and you're there to solve problems. I get annoyed. I'm going all over here, but as I'm going down my little path, I'm annoyed at these politicians that are using our seats of government and power, it seems to me, to up their social branding. If we all got surprised and AOC lost a primary or something in the next few years, or Marjorie Taylor Greene got beat in her seat, we all know that they would have shows on MSNBC and Fox or Newsmax or OANN. So you can't say that they were failed. Neither of them has a piece of legislation that's passed through that came from their desk. AOC's been there for 3 or 4 years? Nothing. But that doesn't matter, because success or failure for these people is not whether or not they successfully tried to solve problems or got legislation. It's, hey, I upped my social brand. Nobody knew who Marjorie Taylor Greene was. Nobody knew who AOC was. Now they do. I consider that joyriding with House seats. And that turns me off along with everything else. I can't follow anyone anymore. I just cross my fingers. Boy, I hope these power hungry weirdos don't hurt me.
Well, can you imagine trying to explain our political system to an immigrant based on those two politicians?
Oh, no.
I mean, they would think they moved into an insane asylum.
I think most immigrants understand what this country is supposed to be more than people who are born here.
Than people on
I would
Twitter.
agree with
They know what they're leaving.
Look, here's where we are, and we haven't even started the beginning of the interview. We've just decided to dive straight into chaos, and I love it. But I think you were talking about social media, you were talking about the internet and some of the ills, but we are living in the influencer generation. And whether it's on social media or in the halls of Congress, everyone wants to be an influencer. It doesn't necessarily mean that they've got anything worthwhile. It's how many followers, how many clicks, how many likes, how many times they can get the headline. Can they get on all of the talking head programs? That doesn't mean that they have anything worthwhile to hear. It just means they're the most outlandish right now, so they're getting the spotlight. And I think we've got to, as social media consumers, because let's face it, Eric, it's not going away. It may evolve, it may change, and I have to embrace it. I've got young daughters. I realize where the industry is going. I actually am on social media. I tell people all the time, Twitter's a sewer. Just recognize you're going to be playing in yucky water, and you're going to be sticky and icky, and it's going to be terrible. And you might find a nugget of joy every now and then, but that's just what it is. I just want to know, when can we go past the idea? Because it seems like when you talk to people one-on-one, they recognize, I want someone more level-headed and calm and maybe more in the middle, but it's only people on the extremes that get the headlines.
I don't know how we get out of this. I mean, it's going to have to be what's going to happen. Someone has to emerge that is all those things, level-headed, but still wildly interesting, right? There still is a great interview, so that every 24-hour network wants to have that person, but even that their personality brings people in, but the actual policies themselves are pretty level-headed. And it would take that kind of dream candidate. You either get that or you don't. But I'll be honest with you. I'm I've always been an optimist. But I'm I'm not an optimist when it comes to algorithms. I think the proof is in the pudding, guys, with already this stuff is in its infancy. Where's it going to be in 100 years, 150 years? All of the stuff that we're dealing with, the algorithms are in their infancy. And from my point of view, it's already been proven that the human brain is no match for them. It doesn't matter where you stand on 2016. There was plenty of evidence from both sides that you got a lot of information online in the lead up to that wasn't real. It was just bots and, all from both sides. Mm-hmm. And there was plenty of evidence of this, and people talked about it. But when the next election came around, right back to social media, these algorithms.
Because
they
people
don't know
wanted
us,
to believe. I'm sorry. I was just going to say it's because people wanted to believe that Trump was X and they wanted to believe that Hillary was Y. And when they heard a story that said Hillary Clinton eats children, they jumped on it and said, see, there it is. Yeah. That's from BMB.com. That has to be true. And you're like, who the hell's BMB.com?
Bed and breakfast.
And also, and right, what it's doing is it's
you combine bed and breakfast and eats children. I mean, come on. What are we serving?
Well, hey, I mean, it's Hillary, right? She did it.
When it's like, and the thing is, when also from humans, when you hear that story, listen, I'm not a fan of Hillary Clinton, but I am aware of the fact that very few people in history have eaten children. So right there, my brain has to go, all right, it's a very select group of people, at least in modern Western civilization, that have actually cannibalized and feasted upon, so in my brain, I would have to have just, 8,000 question marks that you would have to answer to get through. So I don't quite understand people's real need for all that. I guess I could pontificate on, what that is. I don't really know what that is, but I do know that when you say like these stories come, let's remember, I mean, I'm not telling you anything that people don't know already. We're just powerless against it, I guess, is that if you click on something, you're going to get 17 more stories. It's like I like on YouTube or something, if I watch an unboxing of some special edition of some album from some band, I like the fact that the next day the algorithm goes, hey, you want to know something else about this band? Now, if I just ignore it, then it'll go away and they'll stop the suggestions. If I keep clicking, it's going to keep going in that way. But that's what happens in politics. So if you click that thing, all right, now all the algorithm knows is success. Doesn't care what you thought when you read it. Success, click. How do we get more success? Keep throwing this at them. And then it's so encouraged when you get this sort of media environment we have now. Here's a good example. This whole thing with lockdowns and between Trump and Fauci's a saint, Fauci's Hitler crowd, all of those things, people are having these arguments in the dynamics of families. It's usually generational to a certain degree. And we get all these stories every Thanksgiving, how to handle your white supremacist uncle, as if there's everybody's uncle is, we get all of this at Thanksgiving, we get all this stuff. And there is an encouragement.
My nephews are wondering about that.
Yeah, there's an encouragement, it seems to me, from the media for us to cut off members of our own families and our loved ones. It's cheered. There was a story a few months ago where Jennifer Aniston said something like, well, I just had to cut off some friends in this COVID-19 thing. And it was presented as, what an enlightened person. She's willing to let friends and loved ones go on politics. I'm not. That's what families are. Families aren't always sugar and spice. It's people butting heads, but there's this thing that's bigger than that. That's like the love of family, blood being thicker than water. And we're being told now, no, water's more important. You need to.
Do you know how many times I've said on the radio, I mean, literally on anything, I love my wife more than anybody on the face of this earth, and we don't agree on everything 100% of the time. Right. That doesn't mean I have to hate her because we disagree. It just means we don't agree.
Right. And these people don't, that's what I'm saying is once you start that little division and then the algorithm comes in and says, okay, well, let me tell you something that your uncle probably thinks that you don't know. When your uncle does, this nonsensical thing that, that white supremacy is taking over in America. I've lived in America since 1964. I've been aware of myself since about 1972. There's way less of that kind of nonsense in this country today than there was then. There's no doubt. And I'm 57 years old and no one's ever invited me to the white parties. What am I? What, am I terrible? It's like I've never met a white person who said, hey, you want to come to my white supremacy? but it feeds one side's vision of the world. And then
you're not hanging out at the right places, Eric.
I guess not. I'm not invited.
You don't have the right friends, Eric.
I'm not considered a good I'm not considered a good recruit, I guess. But I just wish people, I just wish people weren't so invested in. You can't be right about everything every day all the time. There are certain things that we feel throughout our lifetime and we're willing to fight for. But you can't go to war for every notion you've ever had. And it seems to me like that's where everyone is. No one is willing to go, yeah, you know what? I thought about that. Yeah, I probably wasn't. Yeah, okay. Everyone just doubles down on everything. And it's encouraged because this was what gets us to click. And, I feel hackneyed even saying that. It's like, I'm not saying anything new. I think people know it. And that's what's scary to me. I think most people know it and it still doesn't change their behavior. I'm doing the best I can to know these things and change my behavior. I used to watch 24-hour news all the time thinking, well, I'm on the radio, I got to know. And then I realized it takes an epiphany to realize how boring it is to sit there every day and just kvetch about the same things over and over. And when they get things wrong, they never apologize. They just keep moving on like a shark, So right. I'm not going to change the world. I need to have a little bit of this humility that I want out of others. So to me, where I am now, it's almost like where the Dadaists were after World War I. The idea after they saw all the horrors of World War I, they just looked around at humanity and said, you know what, we're just going to be ridiculous now because there's no sense taking this stuff seriously. Now, we're not taking bullets and mustard gas, so it's not exactly the same perfect analogy, right. But that's where I am right now. I just look around and I'm just thinking nobody's going to get me to jump on board. I'm not following anybody. I'll just laugh as much as I can, hold a mirror up to society a little bit, and hopefully our show, I always tell people, it's what the Daily Show always should have been, which is they're all ridiculous. They're all ridiculous. So if you're going to have fun with it, just not even from the point of view of be fair and have two jokes against, just let it fly. They're all ridiculous. If you want to have fun with politicians, they will all give you material if you're willing to accept it and use it.
It reminds me, and this is not new. We can go all the way back to Jonathan Swift, the grandfather, the great grandfather of satire, who, understood when he wrote a modest proposal. Hey, right. Here's how we get rid of hunger. We take all these children that are living on the streets and we use them as food. That wasn't what he was trying to say. He was trying to solve or at least reflect a social issue in a silly way. I mean, he wrote Gulliver's Travels to be a reflection of England, Yeah. People have used satire forever. Mel Brooks has tried to address so many social ills through satire. And yet, here's what's ironic, Eric. Season 2 of our show, we broke down Blazing Saddles 1 minute at a time. Mm-hmm. We had guest after guest who said, I love this movie. We need to hear this message. We love this message. Can we make this movie today? Oh, hell no.
No, I cannot make that movie. No.
It's crazy. And yet I would argue we would need a movie like that today more than ever.
Well, that's the thing. I think that a lot of this I blame on academics, a lot of what society is going through now and the way that we respond to things, to me, seems like very much like a faculty lounge on a campus. This idea of being offended by things. And if you're offended constantly, well, if you're easily offended, you're going to be offended a lot. That's number one. But if you're one of these people who's easily offended, it's not too many steps before you forget what satire even is or what its purpose was or why. And that's where we are now. That's where we are now, where you have millennials complaining about George Costanza's character and writing things that say, oh, this wouldn't fly today. Look, you moron, it didn't fly then. That was the idea.
That's the point.
The idea was
George was an idiot.
Horrible human being. That was the idea. And because in order to do that, then you just don't get what humor is, what satire is. Gulliver's Travels is interesting because it's 3 voyages, but there's only one that was ever taught to us, really, unless you read the whole book, which is the Lilliputians. And the Lilliputians. But that's exactly his satirical point when he was lashed down and he was so large. His satirical point at that time was that the royalty, or whoever he considered the institutions at the time, were actually very weak, but we didn't know it, right? At any time that Gulliver just decides to get up, all that stuff's just going to snap away because they're little threads over a giant, and that was the point. And I think that goes back to what I was telling you about, I think, about this whole woke thing. That's exactly where I see us right now. Like, people don't realize that if everybody just got up at the same time, nobody wants to be the first, but if everybody just got up at the same time and said, nah, we're not doing this. We're not doing this anymore. I feel like this could all be resolved with one constitutional amendment. And it's like, it would be I would call it the obvious clause, right? So the next constitutional amendment says, it's a little bit snarky, but there's not enough humor in the Constitution. It should say,
there's the quote of the day right there.
In case anyone was wondering, everything that is elucidated in this document applies to every single person in the United States, regardless of station or whatever language you want to use, because we don't really need to reform all that much. All we need to do is just say, hey, that document that maybe we weren't applying to everybody, I'm going to start applying it to everybody. Okay, now let's move on, rather than having every individual. But then that takes power away from people who want power. And to me, that's what I see it all as. I see everything now in terms of, okay, if this legislation goes through, this is my first thought. Who gains power? Who loses power? Once I identify that, that's the prism I see the issue through the entire time. And, we're dealing with it now in this state with, which I don't want to go into politics, but I mean, and I don't know where you stand, Alan.
We wouldn't want to touch that at all.
I know. But Alan, I consider you more kind of lashed in with the GOP. Like, you probably know a lot of people that I don't know. But I just feel like this is political suicide the Republicans are conjuring up right now in the state of Georgia. But we don't have to go into a whole thing. We don't have to go.
Yeah, I mean, they're about to drive their car right into each other.
You have no idea how frustrated I am right now, and I'm not going to go into it.
Okay,
I will just say what you said about power is what I said earlier about we are living in an influencer era. Everybody's worried about the influence, which is basically, by way of extension, power. How much power do I have? How much influence do I have? Can I sway people simply because of my popularity or because of my brand or because of what I brought to social media or to the whatever? Mm-hmm. The two things I wish right now more than anything is a media that was skeptical and wasn't afraid to ask questions. There's no problem believing the first thing you hear, but at least be skeptical enough to say, let me probe just to make sure what you told me I do believe, because I want to believe it. But why are they so afraid to ask because so many stories we've heard, and Eric, you've even covered them. Right. I've covered them. We just had a story come out recently that, like, in the New York, the Washington Post saying, oh, that Russian collusion story? Yeah, that was all BS. Well, yeah, we knew that for the last 4+ years.
What else it is? What's not acknowledged about that is, I've never heard a conspiracy theory I ever believed in my entire life. I am the most I think Oswald killed Kennedy. I mean, I have not heard a conspiracy theory. I don't go for that. But the media will and I think rightly so, point to things and say, well, that's a conspiracy theory, but they will never say what's obvious. Vladimir Putin getting Trump elected was a conspiracy theory. And you can hate everything about Trump and still know that to be true. You can think Trump was the worst president of all time. You could have hated every moment that he was president. It still doesn't make it true that the Russian leader made him president. That was a conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theories live in their own universe, in their own bubble. They're ridiculous on their own. It has nothing to do with how you vote or how you want the world to be. And when you go back to the media, the reason it goes back to the power. Now, the CNNs, I would include Fox, MS, any of them, they're now power players. So their job is to gain power. And if I tell you that I was wrong about that thing that we did 9 million pundit panels on over the last 3 years or 4 for years, then I'm taking away my own power. And so I see CNN as a politician, Fox News as a politician, MSNBC as a politician, Black Lives Matter, whoever's the leader on the street with the bullhorn. To me, I see it all the same. These are all individuals who want power, and they all have groups behind them, and they have bigger groups the more powerful they seem. And to me, the reason we'll never get a media like that is because the media is one of those power players. Otherwise, I mean, all I want from the media is just cover everybody with the same standard. I think that they should be hard on every president. And if you're hard on every president, then you're good, right? Your job is to ask the second or third, but we live in such a dumb time right now where everything is just imagery, you know? You can't, even people who are leaders can't answer 3 questions deep as to why they believe in what they believe. I mean, we're just in a very odd, there was a book called The Dumbing Down of America that I remember came out in the late 80s or early 90s, and it was all the rage. And I read it, and at that time I was like, oh, that guy's hysterical. You know what I mean? Like it always seems like people are getting dumber, but I think he was right. I think we've gotten to the point now where through all of this ideology coming off the campuses, grade inflation. Listen, if I'm 18 years old and you gave me a 4.0, I'm going into the world thinking I'm a genius. It's just that simple.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Shut up, Siri. I'm doing a podcast.
Wait, could you say that again?
I'm glad that's yours and not mine. It's usually mine that pops up.
Usually it's Walt. Yeah.
My wrist. So
I'm glad you don't embrace this technology in this modern 21st century.
Believe me, I'm the worst. I think what China's doing is terrible. I got an Apple Watch. I'm on a Mac. I got a smartphone. I got an iPhone. Yeah, I'm a complete and total hypocrite.
All right, so here's what I'm going to say right now, because we still have a few minutes in the interview segment. Usually we go in the Wayback Machine and say, well, let's talk about how Eric got involved in radio. In this time, we just jumped right into all of the topics. What I do want to do, though, for the audience who may have not had a chance to hear your show, let's forget about the Wayback. We can maybe have you back in season 5 and kind of cover your career. Let's talk about where you are now. You sort of dropped. I didn't want to be the low-hanging fruit. I don't want to be the regurgitating what everybody else is doing. Let's talk a little bit about how you got to where you are with at least the von Haessler Doctrine, because I want to get people to know a little bit more about your show.
Well, I think that's a hard place to start. So I came out of this show called The Regular Guys, which was, pretty successful. We came out of LA and came to Atlanta, did morning radios. And it was, I would say it was shock jockey, but it was, when it was really, really good, it was better than most, which means it had, a little bit of intelligence to it. But I was 31 when I started doing that show. And so as you're on one of those shows and it succeeds, it starts out as this, we started out as a wildly libertarian show, dogs have no rights. I don't care what you see, like we were very, very extreme kind of libertarian, then more, that was the political part, then more shock jockey. And then you add in all these elements of like, pregnant bikini contest, things like that. So as I got older, even though the show was successful, in my mind, I'm like, well, how do you take a show like this and age well? I'll tell you, I'll back up here a little bit. When I was 18 years old, we used to go to this club that on one side of the club, this is the 80s, so on one side of the club was a rock and roll club with rock bands, cover bands, and every once in a while, like a mid-tier, like really good original band would be there. And on the other side was a disco with like Saturday Night Fever, like dance floor lights, all that kind of stuff. And I was a rock and roll guy, like always in a rock and roll. But there was a girl and she liked the disco side. So being a guy who's 18 years old, I dutifully followed her into the disco side one Saturday night. And I saw a guy on the dance floor. He was probably about 71 or 72 years old. I'll never forget his bright red blazer on. And he's dancing with all the young girls, and
my grandfather
they're
was
dancing
there.
with him. They're dancing with him, like novelty, like, isn't it cool to dance with the old guy? But he was digging it, like he wasn't getting why they were dancing. And at 18, I said to myself, never be the old man on the dance floor. And that gets me back to, as the regular guys was doing well, and I was getting older, and I'm in my mid 40s and then late 40s, I just would think a lot about how can we have this kind of sensibility and this fun, but not look like the old man on the dance floor, like, 48-year-old DJ hosting a pregnant bikini contest. It's one thing for a 28-year-old kid to do something ridiculous like that, but it's kind of, so I was always thinking about it. And then me and my partner at the time had very divergent views of that. So when I wanted what the von Haessler Doctrine is today, I wanted the regular guys to kind of morph into that. My feeling was, do what you do better than most people. And for most of us, that isn't a hell of a lot. But the one thing that I do better than most people is improvise conversation in the moment on current events. And we're heading toward, kind of a humorous way of presenting things. And I always I thought, man, if I could just zero in on that, I think this is good advice for anybody, no matter what they do. Zero in. I feel like what any of us can do better than most everyone else, you can fit in a letterbox. So just focus on that. Focus on the thing that you can do better than most other people. And that's where I am with the von Haessler Doctrine. We improvise the show for when you add the podcast 3.5 hours a day. And the people around me are very used to it. They understand it now. It took some people some time, but I quite honestly do not know what I'm going to say when I hear the music start. Now, not always, because I'll get in there and we'll get a conversation going. But what I want to do is I want to start with just the last thing that turned me on, that I was interested in, or that I have an opinion about, or that I just want to talk about. And that's pretty much how I got there, because that aspect was the best part of the regular guys, because everything else in the regular guys, you could find other shows like Opie and Anthony or Stern, or those were the big ones, but a million others that weren't as famous that could give you everything. What they couldn't give you was these two people and their moods, their attitude, their humor. And I thought, if I get a chance to focus on that, I'm gonna focus on that. And just Larry and I were just at odds about that all the time. And he just didn't believe. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in meetings he would just turn to me. I would say something. He would just go, "You don't get it." Okay. All right. So then I just stopped talking. And I
was probably one of the curmudgeons in your audience, because as the show got into its last few years,
it was terrible.
The thing
it was terrible.
No. Well, I kept, I was struggling to continue to listen, except for a couple of things. There were several segments that I always liked, and one of them was the news jog.
I was going to say, Jesus, Walt, you're like in my head.
Yeah, the news jog was always the best, and so because you would cover what was news, but we would get it from your angle, and your angle was generally different from what we were getting on CNN or Fox News or WSB or wherever. At the time.
I don't know. Let me temper. I don't want to say it was different. It was doing it with a humorous delivery, but it was still hitting.
That was the other thing, that it was always
constitutional, like notes. Like, hey, what does our Constitution say? What do our founding documents say?
That's right.
Deliver it funny. We'll be humorous about it, but there's still the core of constitutionality.
Isn't that weird? Yeah. I had more of that libertarian bite, I think, when I was on rock and roll radio than I do now on a talk radio station, which is kind of, I think that's what it's almost it's like a reverse Spice, right? Like having that little bit of intelligence on top of a shock jock kind of show made it something more. And I feel like having a lot of humor on a talk show makes that something different. It's like spicing, like reverse spicing. That's what I'm going to call it.
Well, what I actually think I remember the moment when you made the shift. I don't know enough about Larry, but I do know I was a huge regular guys listener, but the attack on 9/11, That's
Yeah, I
really
was
when
gonna
the
bring
news
that up as
job
well.
took it
Yeah.
took a new turn. And I think you realized I need at least 10, and sometimes it turned into 20 or 30 minutes of just talking about real stuff. It's great to just do silly things. It's great to be silly and have a great fun time, but there's a lot going on, and we can be real for a little bit.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's almost like knowing the room, right? Feeling what is necessary. And in that time period, there was a moment after 9/11 where it was just like I didn't feel like laughing for a while. To be honest with you, I didn't feel like making jokes about stuff for a while. So I went with that honesty, and then you sort of then you feel, well, when do I feel like I can be a little bit, But I think that one thing that did help that show, and it really does, it shows that a lot of background work and studying that you do in life can appear at times where you don't expect it. I think one of the reasons we got a lot of credit, we were on the air when the buildings were hit.
I remember that.
And we got a lot of credit. And the reason, I know that I did this within 1 minute of the second building being hit, I said, that's Osama bin Laden. That's, not a household name, became a household name that day, was a name in the news that if you read enough and you familiarized yourself with the world, you would be aware of. And I think listeners gained a lot of respect for the show that day, because obviously these aren't just shock jocks if they can identify something like that, right. But it takes other shows a good deal of time to identify. And I think that we got some credit for that. I'm not trying to, that's not even a humble brag. I guess that's just a brag bag. But I'm not trying to do that, but people do, that was the nexus, I think, for that show, where people had already felt like that's an entertaining show. I'm enjoying it. Sometimes it's completely bizarre, but when we reacted on air in real time to those events the way that we did, I think that's when it really snapped into place for people that, this show could be really special because smart people who know how to be ridiculous, Well,
when 9/11, when the attacks happened, I was on a conference call and somebody came on and said, we're ending the call. There's something going on we all need to pay attention to. So I flipped my radio on, and I was actually about to change to either WGST or WSB to get news. And I had been listening to y'all earlier and hearing your tone and the way that y'all were handling it in an informative and solemn way. I ended up staying on and listened to y'all until you went off the air. And I realized what y'all were really all about and capable of that day.
Yeah, I think I think the audience solidified on it. It's horrible to think that something like that helped. Life is weird. Something that tragic actually helps your career is, not something I guess to be proud of. But I think if going back and documenting things, I think it did. It was a reason that people suddenly, a show that was ridiculous and bizarre had some gravity to it.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say, because again, being a consummate listener, loving the talk radio, but listening to that as well as in the morning, I honestly think that the sad part is it is what led to eventually the end of the regular guys, because I think you recognized I need to do things that have a little more weight when I'm on the air. It can still be fun. We can still have a laugh. We can still be goofy, but there's got to be some weight behind it. I can't just be fluff anymore. And I think that's what you said. I can't go to the disco side and be the 70s guy in the zoot suit. I've got to be the guy over here being me.
Yeah. And there was a lot of strife, that's the problem, more than anything, there was behind the scenes, it became too hard. There was too much clashing of personalities. There was too much challenging going on. You go to work and you're basically put on trial every day by the other person, and it wears you down. And then toward the end, I just stopped going to meetings. For the last year, I would just leave, and then they would have a meeting with the program director, and I would go. I would still be in the building. I would go hang out with the promotions guys that I really liked and was friends with, and so I wouldn't leave the building, but I wouldn't go into the meeting because they were just shout fest, you know, and I just thought, you know, I just don't need this. I don't need this. I need 10 minutes after every show, debrief. What are we going to do tomorrow? Where are we going? All we need is I've always feel like all I need is 8 hours of sleep. And I used to say the newspaper, they don't exist anymore, but you know what I mean? You know, I need 8 hours of sleep, a cup of coffee. What's going on in the world? Let's go. I don't need this. I think my old partner, you know, we're all motivated by different things. And conflict got him going. That's what energized him, woke him up, got him ready to go. But it wore me down, man. I don't like conflict. I'm cool with just saying, hey, you know, all right, you know, that's how you feel. Yeah.
Well, I think what we want to do to kind of wrap up the interview piece here is it's heading in the direction that I think so many of our guests that we've had in the last 2 seasons when we've opened up our listeners lounge. And I want to talk to Eric about this, but Walt, we're hearing about a guy who was in a career path and things went awry, but stayed true to a focus and had to battle to get back to on air. And Eric, I want you to share that because you were out of the radio limelight for a while because you had a different view of where radio needed to go. So as we wind down, because I want to get to people to hear that, to hear the fact that you had a vision, you had your niche, but you still had to work. You couldn't, it just wasn't handed to you.
No, I did. First of all, I was completely stunned when I was fired. It's weird to be fired from a band that you started. That's a weird thing, right. You know? And so I went through some months of bitterness, anger, just being stunned. I didn't think I had about 5 months left of my contract. And in my mind, I had thought, you know, they're not going to pick this back up again. So I thought like in 5 months, I'd be doing something else, but I was stunned to be brought in and let go. But even through, you know, the bitterness and all of that, I decided, okay, I'll start a podcast right in this room that people can't see, but you can see. I'll start a podcast. I invested in that. I was lucky enough to have, you know, I'm not a super rich dude or anything like that, but I had enough money to go out and buy some decent equipment, get a podcast going. And the Von Haessler Doctrine that's on the radio and doing well now started in my basement. I went into my pocket. I paid people to be on that show. There's a belief in that. And I just felt like, all right, I just got to keep on going. It doesn't matter. And I would say to people, especially people who are out of work in radio or broadcasting, I get asked about podcasts all the time. My response is do them. Do them if 5 people are listening. Do them if 50 people are listening, because this is muscle memory. And what you don't want to do is not do it for 6 months and then have somebody call you and say, hey, Howard Stern's sick. Can you fill in for him? You know, and suddenly right. I haven't done this in 6 months. So we got the podcast going, and the podcast was like 2.5 hours a day. I have a bladder that's made of iron. Like I can keep going. So it was 2.5 hours, no commercials. So when Pete Spriggs, my personal hero, who I had known back in the regular guys days, when he got in touch with me and started offering me, fill-ins for Mark Aram and Eric Erickson, I was in a different position where that was way easier than my podcast. All I got to do is fill 13 minutes and then we're going to break. Right. I'm used to sitting down for 2.5 hours and let's go. But to get back more to your point is, listen, you have to be hard on yourself, but then also give yourself a break. That's it's a balancing act. If you think that you have a vision, if you think that you have something that people would enjoy, that you presented to them, then you have to stick to what you think is true, but then you also have to be your worst critic, right? Or your best critic, who's really going to go after what's working, what's not working. But then the other level of that is you can't let that break you. It's a weird kind of balance that you have to take, where you have to be critical, but also blow things off, keep on marching forward. And I'm just really, really lucky that Pete Spriggs wanted to have me as part of WSB. And then, because I don't think Pete listened to the podcast, I think just there were openings for fill-ins, and he thought, oh, that guy Eric's out there. He didn't really find out what I was doing until I brought it over. But you know, when I first went to WSB to sit down with Pete Spriggs for the first meeting, I had an attitude. Like I got out of my car. I remember closing the door going, they're not going to talk me into to talking about Obamacare every day, whatever. I went in there with a head full of steam. And as soon as I sat down with those guys, their first message was, we don't want you to come here and try to sound like anybody else. You've had your own career. You know where you are. We want to know what you want to do in the future. And I couldn't believe that that's the first time in radio anybody's ever said that to me. And so I brought that back home, and I have this method of when there's a new project, when there's a new thing that I'm going to do, I have a way of doing it. And so the first thing that I do is I say is I think, all right, what am I willing to be criticized for? That's how I start everything. What am I willing to be criticized for? Because you're going to be criticized. And in this particular project, what I said was, I'm willing to be criticized that I don't take enough callers or something like that. And from that grew the fact that I realized I want to do a show without callers, only because every other talk show has callers. Really, that's the only reason. And usually when I like a radio host, the part that I don't like is when people call from their kitchens. I just, as a listener, I'm just like, okay, I'm listening. I'm tuning in for Rush. I'm not tuning in for somebody in a kitchen in Des Moines. And so for me, anytime, so that was the first test. When I called Pete Spriggs, when he started, start putting together a show we can put on the weekends. And I was like nervous. I'm like, how am I going to tell him? I said, I want to do a show where we don't take any calls. And he said, okay, fine. That's fine. You don't want to take calls. I was like, wow, it's that easy. But then there's a responsibility, right? If you get your way, then you have to deliver. Right. And that's the thing. That's the, I know I'm talking roundabout here, but maybe there are people listening, and it probably applies. I'm sure it applies to more than radio or podcasting or anything. It's one thing to find your voice. It's to want to be original, to want these opportunities. But then there's another side where you got to see yourself as an athlete, and you're going to lose that starting quarterback job if you don't win games. And you've got to go in there every single day looking to win that game. Whatever your strategy is, whatever your game plan is, this applies to everybody. If you're a leftist who wants a voice, if you're from the right and you want a voice, whatever your voice is, that's why people lose jobs in radio. They settle in and they forget that they're in show business. They forget that their job is to grow an audience. And yes, I never do. I go in there every day ready to win the game. You know what? Some days you win by 2 points. Some days you blow them out by 35. It doesn't matter. Just don't lose the game. And if you look at, I think that if more people adopted the hard work, the ethic of hard work that they expect out of their favorite athletes, they'd all do much better. Because we're all, what were you out partying on Friday night? You weren't ready for the big game, that kind of thing. That's the mentality I take into the studio every day. This is a game that you can win or you can lose. And my job is to go in there and win it. And it's kind of I really do. I'm a football fan. So I think of myself as the quarterback. I think of the program director in that area. I see all that as like front office, and they picked me. That was their plan. Now my job is to go out. Program director is a coach. The guy above him is the front office. I really see things in those terms. And I would say to people, expect out of yourself what you expect out of your favorite athletes, and you'll do better no matter what you do. That's the mentality that I bring in. I'm going to win the game.
It's amazing because it doesn't matter what the profession that we've interviewed, whether it's a mountain climber, FBI agent, actors, performers, it doesn't matter. They all have at their core, the reason they're successful is because they have that same attitude of it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a little bit of luck. You got to be ready for when the opportunity's there and not shy away from it, but you got to just keep driving and driving and driving. And I love the fact that, Walt, you and I have talked about this. So many of our guests from so many disciplines, it's the same core message.
Yep, it is. It is. And, just like you taking that meeting with Pete and going in and saying, here's what I want to do, and then being willing to deliver on it. I've told my kids that, if you ask for something, you damn well better be ready to deliver. Yeah. If you can't, you're going to be finding something else to do.
Yeah, both of my sons are, kind of, they're at the point where they do kind of corporate meetings and things like that, and all the BS that goes down in conference rooms and things like that. And I've told both of them, the way you want to stand, first of all, you can't accept the blame for everything all the time. That means you're incompetent, right? But just once a year, take the blame for something that isn't your fault. Be the complete, like in so many of these meetings, everyone is covering their ass. Right. That somebody who's smart in that meeting that has power, if you just hold up your hand, you know what, I could have done, you know what, I'm going to take that one. That I'll learn from that. Like, you go in there every week and do that, you're incompetent, you're going to be gone. But don't be a person who covers their ass. Be willing. Everybody says be willing to fail. None of us want to fail. But have the confidence to know that you're doing a good job. Express that. But that doesn't make you perfect. And to me, there's like that. I've only given my kids I've only given them a couple pieces of advice. When they're younger, I told my kids, you want to be the person who goes to somebody's house and they've actually left $100 on the table and they leave the room. And when they come back into the room, the $100 is still on the table. To me, if you're that person, I don't have to get into the minutia. I don't have to get in there and guide you on every single thing. Just be that type of person. Another piece of advice, once they started partying, was it's not if you can drive. The question isn't if you can drive. The question is, can you beat a breathalyzer? Those are two different questions.
Two different things.
Those are two different things.
For which we get back to George Stein on the regular guys.
Capable of driving, but that doesn't mean you're below 0.08.
Yeah. And then
that's awesome.
And then the first thing that I talked about, which is every once in a while, raise your hand. Be the person who takes the blame for something that you weren't really honestly to blame for. Every once in a while, just to not be the personality that's constantly covering your ass. We're only here.
The guy in the room whose fault it was will be really happy with it.
Absolutely. You make a friend. He'll owe you one. Or she. Right. He'll owe you one. Yeah. Well, we're only here for, I'll be end with this. This is how I always felt about the regular guys. It's how I feel about the von Haessler Doctrine. It's how I feel about life. We're only here for a short time. Do something. Do something with it. I call it kicking up some dust. When you, everything on the radio dial is free. There's no charge. There's no door charge. You can get out, you can get in. So I always thought with the regular guys, and that I've rolled over my head still now, is if people are scrolling down there, anytime they come across your frequency, you're kicking up dust. Something is happening. Something is going on. And that's kind of how I feel about life. I'm not a very, I don't have a lot of thoughts about what happens after this life or what happened before it. All I know is I'm here now, and I want to kick up some dust. And as far as doing the right thing, leave the campground a little cleaner than you found it. I think that's really the way to live. That's what I try to do. I'm sure I come up short all the time, but that's the ideal.
I think encapsulated the ideal that I know I have, and I think Walt as well, is you can always learn. You can always grow. There's always something you don't know, and there's always somebody who's better than you. So never settle.
Oh, yeah. Hey, that's another thing that I always tell my kids. It used to be Bill Gates, so I'll go back to that. I say, if you're not Bill Gates or you're not a guy living in a dumpster, then there's always going to be someone doing better than you. It's like or worse. So the guy at the dumpster and Bill Gates, these are the two ends, right? So if you're not those two guys, somebody's going to be doing better than you and somebody's going to be doing worse than you. So just do the best you can.
Right. I jokingly do this a lot with because I direct a lot of theater and stuff, and I would say to actors, I'm like, okay, that sucked. Just suck less tomorrow. If you keep sucking less, you're constantly getting better.
There you go. Good advice.
That's
Just
positivity. I like your positive attitude, Alan. I like it.
There we go. Well, Eric, this has been awesome having you on. I know you're going to try to hang with us for a little bit because we do have a few more segments we'd like to get to. But before we go straight to that, just in case you have to drop, because I know you've got a really busy schedule, tell the listeners right now where they can hear you, how they can stream you, where they can maybe get your podcast. How do they learn more about the von Haessler Doctrine?
Well, I guess these days, just type the von Haessler Doctrine into your favorite search engine, and it's not one word, so it's VON and then space and then my last name Haessler, Haessler. So it's the von Haessler Doctrine. Von is my middle name, which confuses people. It's not the beginning of my last name. So if you put that in there, you're going to find all the places online, Facebook and, YouTube. And we do the video thing on Twitch. I think there's 7 people watching on Twitch. And of course, we're on WSB Radio, which is what they used to call the mouth of the South, the biggest talk radio station in the Southeast. And if you're not in the Southeast, there's a WSB Radio app. And we're on every day from 9 to noon. And then we 3 days a week, we do 30 extra minutes, which I think I'm going to extend out to an hour very soon. And that's with no commercials and everything. Also, a little secret is if you can't listen in real time, every day the show is turned into a podcast and all the commercials are removed. So
that's good.
Pure show.
Nice.
It's pure show. If you wait till 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you can hear each show, because you know how radio is. We have a 3-hour show, but the podcast ends up being like an hour and a half, straight up concentrated. So yeah, just plug the name in anywhere, and you'll find out where you can find us. And don't believe most of the things that come up that you read about me. Most of those things were a long time ago, and there has to be a statute of limitations.
I was going to say the statute of limitations has run.
Plus, if half that stuff was true, you wouldn't be on with us. We have some standards here.
There's a whole background check that goes on. People just believe in the system,
folks. Yeah, please subscribe, rate, review, share. It's all we're all social media, whether we like it or not, and sharing that stuff on your Facebook, on your Twitter, on your Instagram, wherever you are. Really helps to grow an audience, and we all appreciate it. Eric, if you're going to hang with us, one of the things we like to do here is an odd news segment. It's not quite the news jog. We like to call it
It's No Bullshit.
And we know it's that because we found it online, and it can't be fake, right, Walt? So you got the first story.
Yeah, definitely not. Well, we actually made reference to how stupid this one is earlier. From WGN in Chicago, 2 in 3 people say one relative always drinks too much at holiday gatherings.
That's me. Yeah, it's my job.
So I found the stupidest article on the internet, and I brought it here today. So,
well, good for you.
From studyfinds.org, 3 in 5 Americans dread going to family gatherings during the holidays. That's according to a new survey of 2,000 Americans, which they, I guess, speak for all of us, over the age of 21, which, thank God, they're all geniuses, all of whom typically attend large gatherings. Almost 2/3 of the poll agree that there's always one family member who takes things too far when it comes to indulging during the holidays.
You are pukes. You're the lowest form of life on earth.
Now, see, that's not my problem. Usually it's people being just stupid. I don't have a problem with someone getting trashed.
It's not your problem. It's your fault. Meanwhile, 58% agree that their entire family drinks too much at holiday gatherings.
There's a reason for that. It's called a family gathering.
Yeah, that's right. Well, here's the funniest line of this article. So who's most likely to over imbibe and do something shocking? 1/3 of respondents say they can count on that behavior from their uncle.
Well, there's something you don't see every day.
Right. Well, uncles get a bad rap, don't they?
They really do.
Whoa, wait, where's Junior? Was he alone with Uncle Bob? No, get him back in public, out in the public eye.
You got it.
Isn't it like alcohol is going to bring out some truth in people, and the truth is everybody's got problem with like a problem with family members, or at least they know how to gaslight somebody that they don't like,
yes.
or whatever. And so the alcohol for the most part, I'm a pretty friendly alcoholic. I mean, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a pretty friendly.
You heard it.
Boy, you slip.
There's how you survived in radio.
I'm a pretty friendly.
I'm your
drunk.
friendly neighborhood alcoholic.
I remember my mom told me a long time ago that you have to be drunk to enjoy the company of another drunk. You know, and so I'm always aware of that. Like if you're drunk and you're being ridiculous, other people who are drunk think you're wonderful, but the one sober person thinks you're the dumbest person alive. So sometimes it may be the family member that's not drinking at all, just not getting into the whole thing. But aren't you amazed by how much bad blood there is in families between sisters and brothers? And it really is, you add a little alcohol to that. That's why alcohol shouldn't be on planes, by the way. You know, you're in a tube 30,000 feet in the air with a bunch of humans. You really don't want to ply them with alcohol because some people are fun drunks. I think I'm a fun drunk, but some people are not. And
see, that's why everybody should get a THC gummy when they get on the plane.
Right. That's right. Yeah, then they'll have a freak out, right? Then somebody have a panic attack and want to jump out.
Oh my God, the seat's shaking.
But everybody else will be fine.
Yeah.
It's like, hey man, it's his first THC. Let him have some time.
There you go.
Mellow.
You have to sit next.
Well, this article goes into a whole lot of statistics that I'm not going to bore everybody with. But 3/4 of people feel the holiday party is where they truly find out what their coworkers and family are like. This also proved to be one of the top reasons people attend office parties, with 46% seeking to discover the hidden side of their colleagues.
It's no bullshit.
Boy, that's weird.
You know, here's the weird thing. I get these like phrases in my head. Part of it is Shakespeare. Part of it is my education. I'm walking around the kitchen the other day and I'm like, in vino veritas, like out of nowhere, it pops in my head. With much wine comes truth. And I'm like, yeah, that is absolutely true.
Yeah. But who wrote it? We don't know.
Some drunk.
I've got the next news story. We always love going to Florida. Florida provides some of the greatest entertainment for us in the news. This one called Patrol Car Tryst. While seated in the rear of a Florida Highway Patrol cruiser, Summer Watkins had a brilliant idea. She said, babe, we could record an OnlyFans video back here.
Holy cow,
said the 24-year-old to her male companion, who would soon join her in the squad car.
I am a golden god!
Watkins and Jordan Noah, age 24, was seated in the police car after the BMW was pulled over Thursday since he was driving on a suspended license. Cops planned to transport the duo to a Shell station to just make arrangements to get home. But that's when they got the idea, hey, if I blow you in the backseat of a police car, we could get more followers on OnlyFans. The cop said, that's not a good idea. I would not do that. She's like, oh, come on, we can do that. She's like, no, you can't. Well, they decided to do it anyway. I'll cut to the chase. After doing it, the cops found out because of the camera that is filming you in the back seat of the police car. They have since been picked up and charged with lascivious acts on camera and in public. So besides just driving on a suspended license, now they've actually got to show up in court for lewd and lascivious behavior caught on camera.
It's no bullshit.
Same thing.
Anytime someone in the back seat of a police car says this is a good idea, that is not a good idea.
That's how they got in the back seat to begin with. They were sitting there, hey, wouldn't this be cool?
Yeah, but that goes to what we were talking about before. I mean, just that whole social influencing thing. And, you know, and also I think that people are getting dumber. Young people are dumber. They don't know.
Yes.
You know, it is actually, there's kind of like there's sort of a sad element to that whole OnlyFans thing. You know, a lot of young people are deciding that this is a way to make money. And young people, if you remember back, I mean, there's some kind of concept, I'm going to get older, but it does not feel real. It does not feel real. And I just thinking, I don't know, 10, 15 years, there's just going to be a rash of when people realize that's going to be out there forever, man. The person you are at 23, 24 is quite often not the person you are at 40 or 44. And I just think it's going to be ruinous. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe attitudes about it all the way around will have changed.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, I don't think I'm wrong. I don't think I'm wrong. I think if you're and women do it, you know, they're you know, they think, well, I make money doing this. It's a lot easier doing this. So I'm just taking my clothes off in front of the camera. That's better than going to work and having the boss man. And I got to tell you, I can think of myself at 18 or 19. I don't think anybody would want that show, but mentality wise at 18, I think that I could go, well, I'm going to care when I'm 50. I'm never going to be 50. And I think there's going to be a lot of depression in 15, 20 years when people recognize the record of themselves that they've left for everybody that will never be deleted. Your children, I mean, great grandchildren. Hey, check out great grandma back in 2021. Wow.
Look what she was doing for $20 a share.
Yeah. Well, it's like that Saturday Night Live skit where Amy Poehler realizes that she's got a tramp stamp that she needs to get rid of. And it's like the stuff you can buy. This is like an acid to burn it off.
Yeah, right. To burn it off. Right. Yeah, exactly. Except at least you
that
can put a
stuff
shirt
doesn't burn
on
off the internet.
Huh?
That stuff doesn't burn off the internet.
Yeah. I do think that there's going to be just wild, you know, if you like, let's say it's like 1972, right? And you're young and coming up, it's like, and somebody offers you, hey, be in a magazine, you'll be naked, you know, whatever. And you're like, well, that'll help me through. Magazine runs. And, you know, everybody forgets about the magazine. It's gone. I made some extra money. I can't imagine, like, the first level of the internet would be people who in the late 90s were maybe like in their late 40s or early 50s. And all of a sudden, because the internet goes and picks up everything that's ever happened before it, suddenly there it is, 1972, this magazine thing. You know, that I would imagine that there are stories like that where people were able to leave it behind completely. They did this crazy thing one summer in 1972, and now, boom, somebody had that copy, scanned it, put it on the internet, and, you know, this is just the next progression of that.
Hey,
and now it's
Vanessa
forever.
Williams.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Except she was already famous, right? Having her, it's a different thing if you are now a well-respected history teacher in a middle school somewhere, right? Who, you know, got a little crazy in the summer of 72, you know, like when the internet came in, I thought about that. And now it's just, boy, I feel like we're graduating kids into the world, and we don't have them ready for the world, and they're going to pay for it. They're going to pay for it. You know,
there's going to be some interesting things going. You talk about having like 3 and 5 worried about drinking at family parties. You let OnlyFans go on another 10, 15 years. Everyone's drunk at that family gathering.
Oh yeah. Just, I mean, how do you live that down? You know, I mean, some of the things.
I'm
and when you're online, you have to go more and more extreme if you want to do right. How do you live that down when you're 45 and your kids see that? I mean, I don't know. That's
think about it. This is what's going to happen. Too many of these stories are going to be in the news about the mom wants to be running for the PTA now. She wants to help because she cares about her kids. She cares about her community, and someone will dig it up and use it against her.
Yep. Yeah. Like I say, there may be so much of it that people become immune to it. I don't know.
We'll have to wait and see. That's the thing. We're living in it right now.
Yeah. Well, it's people who are 22 or 23 just will never realize. You know, they say youth is wasted on the wrong people, and it was certainly wasted on me.
The young.
Yeah. You just, you know, you just don't realize what the world, how you're going to look at yourself, and how different you are in like different decades of your life. And you're the same person, right? I mean, essentially you're the same person, but you end up in a very different place at 35 from 25 and 45 from 35. And it's an evolution. And I know I've taken a crazy, wacky story and brought us down to earth here, but I think
you're absolutely right.
There's going to be a reckoning with all of this stuff. And I'm 57, so I'll probably be dead. I wanted to see it. It's fine.
Well, all right. Speaking of reckonings, I've got this one from the Daily Mirror. McDonald's worker threatened with BB gun by customer angered by drive-through queue.
Inconceivable.
This one is crazy. I kind of thought it was going to be about a broken ice cream machine, but not so lucky. A McDonald's worker was threatened by an irate customer in a drive-through queue who pulled a gun on him, the court was told. The victim had been dealing with a traffic issue outside the branch of Gateshead where the shocking incident happened. Arthur Walker had tried to leave the queue, causing issues for other motorists. And when the worker told him what to do, he produced a realistic-looking imitation firearm at the car window and threatened him. It turned out to be a BB gun, for which police found ammunition in the dad's home. Which ammunition?
Okay.
BBs.
BBs.
Kevin Wardlaw, the prosecutor in Newcastle, said the victim was on traffic control, making sure everything ran smoothly. The defendant was in his car in the queue of traffic, and he decided to leave the queue, and that caused issues. The defendant took exception to being told what to do and produced the gun, an air weapon, and placed it in the window and made threats to the complainant, causing some concern. The victim said, "I came to work to protect the public and don't expect to be threatened for doing my job." Walker, 45 of Gateshead, was traced through his car registration, and the weapon was found at his home along with the plastic pellets for it. Mr. Wardlaw said, he said it was a stupid thing to do, and he expressed remorse.
It's no bullshit.
He was 45.
Yeah.
Shouldn't you know better?
Yeah. Well, you should probably also know better than to be in the queue at McDonald's at 45 for what that's doing to your body. But,
that momentary anger stuff is just so weird, and I know that I used to have it. But I got rid of it over the years. But I mean, yeah, I think by 45 I wouldn't have acted like that.
Right.
But it really is it's a weird thing where you just can't control your anger, and in that moment where in your brain you look stupid but you can't stop. Right. I'm assuming that's what this guy was in. I'm assuming that in the middle of this he was realizing, I'm a complete jackass here, but I cannot
didn't get
stop
his
being
fillet
a
of
jackass.
fish.
It's too late. I have committed.
That's right. I'm method. I'm going all the way with this.
I am all in.
It really is. It's like I realized that with anger issues and stuff, because I try to work on this stuff, because I don't go to psychiatrists, but I try to work on myself. And I realized at one point that anger, that kind of anger anyway, is usually, at least in myself, I realize it's a control issue. Like I want to be able to control the situation, and I want, or it might even be something different. Like I want my wife to say this right now, and she's not saying that. Once I address that with myself, which is you don't have the right to control other people, and you're not in a position where you can always control the situation. I won't say that it's gotten perfect, but it's gone down like, over 90%. It's just like, okay, you're in a situation you don't like. Well, guess what? You're probably not going to die today. So you'll get through it, and the rest of your life, you won't be in that situation. And maybe you'll learn something from it. I used to have all of these, a traffic jam? What the hell good does that do? Sitting in your car, getting angry in a traffic jam. There's nothing you can do. You got to just be like, okay, well, this was one of those days, and move on. But if you allow that anger, and what is this? Like, I didn't want a traffic jam today. I'm going to be late for this thing. And then it just builds and builds and builds. And this guy probably sat in this line, and he probably correctly saw that service was terrible, and he's stuck. There's somebody behind him, somebody in front of him. And then he has that moment like, oh, well, I'm just going to change this, as opposed to, you know what? Sometimes you just sort of stew in it until it is over, and you can move on. But I think that that's the thing that has to be identified is most anger issues I found with myself was about control. I'm not controlling. This situation is not what I want it to be. But, who the hell said the world's supposed to do what you want it to do anyway? Right.
Well, it's very much a version of the serenity prayer, right? Like recognizing the things I can control, giving me the grace for the things I can't, and giving me the knowledge to know the difference.
Perfect wisdom right there. Perfect wisdom. And it only took me, I don't know, 50 some odd years.
Look, I'll be honest. It took me a divorce to finally realize, okay, you know what? I can't control everything. Yeah. There are people who are going to do what they want to do. I have been you know what? Side, since you brought it up, I have been such a happier person realizing I don't have to worry about impressing other people. I just have to be happy with me.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Just me.
Yeah. And when it comes to the rest of the world, I've gotten to the point where it's just like, don't hurt me. just don't hurt me. Just sort of and I'll leave you alone if you leave me alone.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Thing,
Absolutely.
Do what you want. Look, there are rules of the road, right? We all admit that cold-blooded murder, that's out. Okay, we got a few.
That's
stop at red, go on green. There's some rules of the road that everybody has to adhere to. And after that, it's like live your life and allow me to live my life. We'll all pay our taxes and just leave each other alone.
And if what makes you happy makes me happy, let's hang out.
Right.
Otherwise,
no, that's not.
Otherwise, you go do your thing. I'll go do my thing, and we'll be okay.
Yeah,
exactly.
All right. I've got the last news story. This one, Walt, goes back to a trend we've had in the last few days with bombshells being found in strange places. I don't know if you came across this story, Eric. If not, you need this for your show tomorrow.
Okay.
Pulling something out of a person's butt is like opening a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
I found that to be true.
That is true.
Could be a sex toy, a doll, a bottle, or maybe a living eel, which has happened before in the news. However,
yikes.
Whatever you find, you usually get to throw it away without military intervention, unless it's an artillery round.
But hold on. Is this something you find or something that you misplace and have to retrieve?
Well, let's go.
Okay.
Where did I put that?
Ironically, let's dive deeper into this particular story. The staff at the Gloucestershire Royal Hospital were in for a surprise of their lives when a local man showed up in considerable pain. When asked where he was hurting, he unceremoniously started to point to his lower regions. When the doctors got to investigating, they sure enough discovered a foreign object lodged in the man's rectum.
Mm-hmm.
That object, a 57 millimeter World War II era anti-tank shell. And of course, there was an explanation to go with it.
I fell.
Now, this is actually a good... What?
Well, this is a good... Now, hold on. Before you go any further, that's one of the shells that's it's got like a... It kind of looks like a male... It's phallic, right? Yeah. Those things. But like the thin and then they have the big bulbous end thing.
Right. There's a pointy end and it gets to 57 millimeters around the
base. Okay. I'm with you.
It's like the size of a big waffle.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's quite that big, but it's
not small.
The guy's in pain.
What is the good excuse? What was the good explanation?
So the guy said he found the shell when he was having a clearing out of the stuff that he was working on in the attic. He slipped on something after having put it down and fell ass first on the shell, shoving it up his own butt.
You hate when that happens.
Oh boy, I tell you, I would have come up with the same story probably, but the first question is: so when you clean, you do this in the nude. This is something. House cleaning is something that you do in the nude after lubing up. Okay,
I can accept that. The bomb went off.
Now, look, I've seen many videos on the internet that start that way. It has never happened in my household, but I'm assuming it happens elsewhere. He was in considerable pain, and he said, look, I collect military memorabilia. I never expected this to happen. Well, here's the crazy thing. As doctors put him on the operating table, they realized this could actually be a live round. They had to call the military, who then brought in a bomb squad into the operating room to determine whether or not that everyone might blow up at any moment if he put just the right amount of pressure on this shell stuck up his ass.
First of all,
apparently, good.
Okay, nobody died, so we know that.
No, nobody died. I'll tell you that. We'll say everybody's okay.
So it's fair game.
It's okay.
Let me just say that it's one thing to be an aficionado. And I know people who are into munitions and history, but you can fall in love with that stuff a little too much. I think that's what happened here.
He really loves history.
My goodness gracious. What a bad...
Yeah.
It's like some people can convince themselves that this is a good idea. I'll just do this. This is what I want to do.
It's not a good idea.
It's like people who think like there are people out there after all of the evidence, but today somebody's looking at heroin going, yeah, I can dabble with it.
Yeah,
looks great. I'm the one.
I might be the one that's okay with it.
I'll dabble with it and I'll drop it, whatever. There are all kinds of people who talk themselves into bad ideas. This is one of the worst that I've.
This is one of them. Well, doctors realized, and this is actually, it could have been fatal because of the amount of damage that was in that area of the body. Had the shell been a little bit longer, he could have literally caused himself to die.
Oh, what, by impacting it? Like it would have impacted down?
Ripping his colon and all the other areas of the body and causing all of the sepsis and everything else to just explode into the rest of your body.
Boy.
They said they had to pull the shell out. The bomb squad did arrive, and thankfully for everyone, no one was actually ever in danger because the bomb squad, when they arrived, realized the shell was a non-explosive anti-tank round, but they didn't know because they didn't see the tip until they got it out.
It's amazing. It's astounding. But it's no bullshit.
Well, let me just say it was good for everybody except for the patient, because now this story's out there forever.
Exactly.
I think I would rather have blown up. I don't know. I think it's weird. I think about a lot how people just can't handle the concept of fantasy and sex. And it really is like, how do you get to the point where you've ratcheted things up this high? Are there not just products that you can buy that can come to your home in a brown paper or a brown box? It really is astonishing how many people put themselves into embarrassing situations because of some kind of sexual drive. It is stunning. I've been married for 34 years. Well, we've been married 24 years, lived in sin for 10 years. And, I've been on the radio and stuff, and you think of all the temptations in life and whatever. And again, I have these very simple maxims I keep in my mind, and one of them is, I'm not going to hand any other person the keys to ruin my life. Right. So I could be at work, I could be 28 years old or 32 years old, and flirtation happening with someone at work, and maybe that person's really cool. And when you're married, a girl you're not married to is always suddenly way more interesting than your wife, but and to me, but I always have these voices in my head. Am I willing to hand this person the ammunition they need to ruin my life?
Ruin everything about
everything
me,
I've had, and I just think people don't have that governing thing. Also, masturbation, people. 10 minutes later, 10 minutes later, you forget the whole damn idea. If you think of the way people get in trouble. Well, what I'll do, and I'll go out of town, and I'll meet this person, and it's like people do things from the sex drive that they don't even understand. Okay, let's say, guess what? You did that thing online. You met somebody. You're going to be in Tulsa anyway, or anywhere in the world, right? Okay, I'll meet up. My wife will never find out. Okay,
Tulsa.
Unless the person you meet up with, I don't know, is being investigated for a crime. Like, you don't know. You don't know that person. You think, it's like, I don't know. I know I've gone a long way from this, but my assumption is this guy at one point looked at this munition and said, I'd like to shove that up my ass. I think that would feel good. And you would think that there would be like all of these sort of red flags that would go, no, it's probably not a very good idea. And there are plenty of non-explosive things that you can shove up your ass.
Or you can just go take a walk or go have a beer.
But
I've taken a dump that size before. Certainly, it'd be fun going the reverse way.
Or challenge yourself with something like a really large 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. I mean, you can challenge yourself to a lot of things. It doesn't have to be, can I handle this?
I saw this in a video once.
I mean, this is why, like, I'm a libertarian.
I saw this on OnlyFans.
Oh, yeah. Probably it exists. You see, his grandkids are going to see that. It was challenged. You know why I'm so I'm so immune to OnlyFans? as I used my real name on the radio. There's nothing I could do. Like if I was known as, Festus Dumbass or whatever, I could go online and do anything I want. But anything that I do online, the name that I use on the radio is on my credit card. So it's like I have the. I often think about that. I talk about, like, you think about morality. Like, I've been with my wife 34 years and I've never cheated on her. You know what? I also don't have George Clooney's face. So if I had George Clooney's face, do I know that I would really be this moral? That I would be this great? If I didn't have the same name on air as on my credit card, do I know that I'd be this good and not be on OnlyFans? I don't know. So I guess I get lucky. I've got enough morality, plus knowing that I can be easily busted for anything to keep me in line.
Yeah, we live in that with where we are. We've decided, hey, our name is our brand, and now we're like, oh shit, our name is our brand.
Yeah, I can't go anywhere.
Boy, did I screw that one up.
Yeah. I can't even go into a vape shop. It's like Santa Claus walking into the North Pole. It's like, hey, you're on the radio, Eric Von Haessler.
Hey, you're gonna get high. No,
like, okay, all right.
All right. Well, let's move to our final segment, because I know we're having a blast, and I know Eric's got to go here in a minute. We have a final segment we like to share with our listeners everything we've been watching, reading, and listening. This is our entertainment segment. So, Walt, we'll start with you, and we'll let Eric play third in this, so we can go around the horn. We'll do just watching first. In the last week, some things that you might have been watching that the audience might find interesting to try to check out.
Well, I'll mention two things from Netflix to start with. One of them is Lost in Space, dropped this week.
Season 3.
And
I heard it's the final season.
Oh, yeah, that's about right for Netflix. But I've started watching that, and season 3 holds up. It's as good as season 1 and 2. About 2 or 3 episodes in. It's definitely worth watching, and I've really been real happy with this series. It isn't campy. It's not, what the original series was, but it has been very good. And then the 2002 movie that we actually had Mike White, who played one of the soldiers in this. We Were Soldiers is on this month on Netflix. If you've never seen that, or if it's been a while, it is just a great movie. There are some tough scenes, but it is really fantastic.
It's awesome.
And then on Hulu, I realized today that the series The Pacific, which was done by HBO, is on. And I don't know why I've got this war theme going today, but The Pacific is an excellent, excellent series. So if you've never seen that, check that out on Hulu.
All right, cool. What was the Clint Eastwood? Didn't he have something to do with a docu-series on the Pacific?
Yeah, his was Letters of Our Fathers or something like that.
Flags of Our Fathers.
I believe Flags of Our Fathers. Yeah, okay. I think that was his.
Okay.
Which is also a great series.
All right. For my watching this last week, I'm still giving it time. I don't know. I'm more forgiving with shows than I should be, but maybe because I'm not addicted to so many. I watched episode 5 of Wheel of Time. It still can't figure out where it's going or how it's going to get there. It's fantasy, whatever. On the flip side, Hawkeye episode 3 on Disney Plus, so freaking good. I love Jeremy Renner. I think he's awesome. And the girl is perfect counterpart to her. I love it. This is like the new Die Hard. It's set at Christmas. These guys are going through this action adventure story. He's just trying to get home to his family. Really, really good. Walt, on your recommendation, I started Lost in Space, episode 1, season 1, way back when everybody else, I guess, watched it. So I'm hooked into it already. So I will watch the rest of Lost in Space. Speaking of Die Hard, it's the holiday season. I did crack open the single greatest Christmas movie ever and watched Die Hard the other night. And I followed it up because I was done. I was like, it's only 10 o'clock. I don't have to get up for another 7 hours. I could watch another 2-hour movie. And Ender's Game 4K was available to stream. I hadn't seen it in a while, and I watched it, and I was like, that's not a bad little flick. So watch that. If you've not seen it, based on Orson Scott Card's, it's the first book of a trilogy. It's really, really, really good. As far as YouTube, if you like movie reaction channels, Ashleigh Burton, fantastic. I love watching a millennial watch movies for the first time and react. Popcorn in bed. and I'm still hooked in the Irish group, the Try channel. Irish people try whatever, fast food or Waffle House or alcohol or whatever. Fun reaction channel, little 10-minute videos, little nuggets that just, next thing you know, you've wasted 3 hours because you just go, well, I'll just watch one more. It's only 10 minutes. I'll watch one more. It's only 10 minutes. So those are the things I've been watching this last week. Eric, let's go to you. I don't know if you've done any homework, but what do you watch?
Mostly what I watch is live sports and then little YouTube niche channels. But so It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia has new episodes on FXX, and I think that's the funniest show of all time. I absolutely love that show and their attitude. The first two shows, it's kind of weird. I don't know. I got the very, very concept funny. I don't know. I don't know if maybe filming during COVID has kind of brought things to where you can't have that many people around. It seems a little, the first episode seemed somewhat sketchy to me, but meaning sketches. So the concept is, what did they do with their PPP loans? And then it's kind of like awesome. Like exposition, and then you go off into the sketch and then the next person, which the show isn't usually like that, but the concept's really good. And the second show it gets somewhere about the last 10 minutes of the second show is like, okay, that's Always Sunny. It's like that's the groove. So I think they do 10. So there should be 8 more of those that come out in the next few weeks. I'm looking forward to, I think in a week or two, or maybe it just started to happen, the final season of The Expanse, a show that I love, science fiction show, is coming on. And I really do. That's my favorite science fiction show probably in the last 10, 15 years. As Star Wars and Star Trek and all these things have just been woke city, The Expanse is a diverse cast and all that stuff, but they're the people I'm introduced to as these people. There's no swapping of gender to make a point or anything. It's just like, this is the crew, that I've known from the jump. So I really do enjoy that show.
It's really, really good. Just really good science fiction.
Yeah, and well done, well made. I've watched it on big screens down here with the sound, just very, very well done. I really do like that show a lot. So I'm looking forward to that. But the truth is, and I can't say that I recommend this, because you got to be like the munitions aficionado we talked about earlier to go this deep. But Get Back on Disney Plus. I am a huge Beatles fan. You want to hear something very quickly?
Yes.
The whole reason that I'm doing anything in the entertainment industry or anything at all has to do with the Beatles. In 1974, I had a doctor's appointment at like noon. So I stayed out of school for the morning. And I went in, and my older brothers had left all their albums. They were moved out into apartments and stuff. And with headphones, I pulled out Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So this is 1974. This was like 7 years after it came out. I'm 10 years old. And Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was a hit on the radio. Elton John had done a remake that was a hit on the radio. So I recognized it. And it was so colorful and everything. And so I put it on. I listened to it from beginning to end. And it changed my entire worldview. I mean, literally, my world went from black and white to Technicolor. I mean, honestly, before I listened to that album, my whole world was, will mom and dad find out I did something? Will I get that thing that I want? That was my world. My world was, will I get what I want? Will I get in trouble for the things that they don't know that I've done yet? And when I listened to that album, it was an explosion. You can do this. This is a possibility. So I've been hooked since I was 10 years old. Now, that being said, this is 3 episodes and it's 8 hours basically of being a fly on the wall, sitting in a room, 2 different rooms with these guys while they argue with each other and don't know what the hell they're going to do next. So you have to be an uber fan, but this is how much of a munitions aficionado I am. In the first week, from Thursday to Thursday, I had watched it complete twice. So that's 16 hours that I put in. And now I go back in, and just because I want to dissect certain moments, because I know so much about what was going on. I can't say that it's not too long, but it's not too long for me. Peter Jackson. I'm not real familiar with the trilogy of Lord of the Rings and everything. He gets a bad rap for for being too long, doing his stuff too long. But and there's no doubt that if you can do an 8-hour show from this, that you've got a kick-ass 2-hour movie in there that maybe would have been better to turn people on to the band. This isn't going to do that. But for me, if you say to me, Eric, here's a ticket, you can go back in time, just sit in the corner and watch the Beatles argue with each other. I'll do that all day long. So I'm not recommending it to people, but for me, it's manna from heaven. Is that how you say it? Just
manna.
Yeah. Manna. Yeah.
I would tell you, I loved it. I watched the first episode and I was exactly like, I kept waiting for it to be like a documentary because they kept putting it as a documentary. And I realized this isn't a documentary. I'm actually in the room with these guys figuring out what are we going to play for a live set and what are we going to pull and how are we going to change it. And I suddenly 2 hours gone. Yeah. So I'm not a huge Beatles fan like you, but I was there and that's awesome. Yeah, I would say yes, give it a try.
It's real long form. And what you see if you're interested in seeing it, there's 5 or 6, there's a handful of songs that are considered Beatles classics, and you're watching them bring them in and play them for the first time, and they're trying to work out and you
work through it. Yeah.
And one part that's gotten very famous off it, which is pretty great, is McCartney at one point just starts hitting the bass. And within 2.5 minutes, he goes from initial germ of an idea to basically having worked out what Get Back is going to be. And you see it happen. There's a part where Lennon is trying to think of the words in I've Got a Feeling, his part. Everybody had a hard year. Everybody had a good time. And he's like, everybody had it. And then you see his eyes go up. Everybody had a. And for me to be watching that process happen is fantastic. But I do think at some level you do have to be a fan. And I do think that people are correct when they say, boy, you could have put together a 2-hour movie that would have turned on a whole new generation of this band. Because
but that'd be different. You could make a 2-hour documentary of the synthesis, but you wouldn't get the sense of being there watching creativity happen and realize just how freaking talented they all were.
And this is their worst time. You're watching them at a time where they're having trouble. And here's it's funny because you can overdo it, because we were just talking about the fact that no matter what you want to do, you have to be motivated, and there's something you have to understand about what the background to that is. So they decide they have to do something. Rather than they haven't played live in like 3 years, they could walk out there and do anything. People will be happy with it. They decide, no, we'll write and record 14 new songs and then play them live. If that isn't crazy, in 2 weeks, if that isn't crazy enough, while this is going on, the White Album is #1. While this is going on, Hey Jude is the biggest song in the world. So they're actually thinking to themselves, oh, people don't want to see us go play back in the USSR. It came out 2.5 months earlier than what they're doing. That's the kind of pressure they're putting on themselves to always be original, always be new. The Beatles, it's a weird thing with the Beatles, because I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but almost all of their biggest singles are not on albums. Like, they wouldn't do that. Like, they would put out a single and then they would make sure it wasn't on the album because they thought they'd be ripping you off because you already paid for the single. So Hey Jude, She Loves You is not on an album. Hey Jude is not on an album. Lady Madonna is not on an album. There are so many, and I feel like we're catching them at a point where they're really actually kind of exhausted. They've been pushing themselves so hard that they're pretty exhausted, and Lennon's on heroin, so that doesn't help.
We keep talking about it. I know you want to throw it almost out there as like, if you're a Beatle fan, but I had a completely new respect for both Paul McCartney and John Lennon talking back and forth. And I'm like, holy crap, I see the young artists still inside those mythical figures that we now know as adults. And of course, they're old, their dad are old, so it's a whole different thing. See that. And you're right. You feel like you're in the room with them. Peter Jackson, I think, did a great job selecting the footage in a way that made you feel that. That's a feeling.
His first cut was 18 hours. Wow. His first cut was 18. Wow. He cut it down to 8. So that's what I'm watching. And for the rest of my life, that will always be to me where I will just go, hey, you want to go hang out with the Beatles for an hour? And I'll just jump in there and do that.
You know what? All they need to do now is change it into VR, and we'll all jump into the metaverse, and we'll just watch them in the room.
I want to get in there and go to John and Paul. You guys may not realize this, but George is going to have the best solo career for the first 3 years. You might want to listen to him.
Stop dismissing George.
But also inside of it, I think the thing, and this is for Beatles fans, I think that you find, for all the respect for everybody, because I think Ringo's the hero. Ringo is just sitting there going, when you guys want to stop with the verbal masturbation, I'll help you turn this into Beatles magic. He doesn't cause troubles, and he's always there. But with John and Paul, I think it becomes obvious that Paul's the one that decides this is good enough to go on a Beatles album, or at least by the time we're catching up with them, he's the one that's not allowing them to say, we're the Beatles. We can spit on a record and put it out there. He's the one. Right. And I think it's exhausting the other band members. And then you throw in heroin. There's a lot there if you know the backstory. So I'm not saying everybody can hang out for 8 hours, but I've enjoyed the hell out of it.
All right, we'll rapidly move on to a section that might be a little shorter because we're all busy right now. But if you're reading anything, Walt, what do you got?
Oh, I'm reading a couple things, but I think I've mentioned them before, and I'm wrapping up Bill O'Reilly's Killing the Mob, and then somebody just gave me Killing Lincoln, so I guess that's my next one of my stack of about 400 books to read.
Okay. Yeah. For me, I am almost done with Dune, and I am very happy to hear that Dune is finally the Denis Villeneuve version is back now on Amazon. If you want to rent it, you got to spend a lot of money, or it's going to come out in January on Blu-ray. It is a phenomenal adaptation of the first half of the book. I am finished the first half of the book through that, so I am blown away with what he did with the first half of Dune. I can't wait to see what they're going to do with the second half. So that's what I've been finishing up is the book Dune. Eric, are you reading anything?
By the way, Dune, that's just a great book. That's just an unbelievably well-written book. And I do love this version of it. I think I can't say his name, Denis Villeneuve, however you say his name.
It's Denis Villeneuve.
I just think it's stunning that he's been able, there's so much, that's a book that I thought no one could ever make a good movie out of. Because there's just so much information and so many characters and so many thises and that's
and the history and the lore and the religions and the factions.
It forces exposition, which is a movie killer for me when you just constantly have to explain backstory and things like that. But he did it very, very well. I've been reading my favorite. Now this is I'm gonna get all people that who's that guy think he is, but I've discovered a guy named Roberto Bolaño that I'd never heard of, this is like the 8 hour thing. I can't recommend Bolaño. This book 2666 is just an absolute mind-ripping trip that is like no other book. I can't even begin to explain it. And then I went back and read another book of his before. He died at 50 in the early 2000s. Another book is called The Savage Detectives. And for me, a lot of people, like my wife couldn't finish it. My son turned me on to it. He couldn't finish it. It just hit me really, really hard. And I just finished a nonfiction book called The Big Picture by Sean Carroll, which is a really, really, really good, what I would call popular science book, meaning smart people can explain really high concepts to dumb people like me. And he really does like like Carl Sagan. He takes on everything and makes it very engaging and readable. And you can disagree, at certain points, but it's when you get to that quantum physics level, my mind gets blown, and I tend to read and expose myself to it to the point where I don't even understand it anymore, but I just want to be around it. It's like, okay, tell me more. You've totally melted my brain, but go ahead and tell me more.
You might be full of it, but right now I'm all in.
Exactly. So, string theory and all that, but this book is more about just taking the concept of life, what life is, perspective, context, planet from Newtonian out down to quantum, and just gives it a lot of perspective. And then he has his own opinion that you don't have to necessarily agree with. But even if you don't agree with it, it's just a great kind of overview. I mean, he's one of these scientists that's just a full-on atheist. There's no getting around it. I find science sometimes arrogant in the fact that sometimes scientists don't want you to think about mystery anymore. And I find that disconcerting. It's like, well, that's, no, I do want to think about the things that people have been thinking about forever. I do want to know and sometimes scientists can get so like, hey, we've looked at it. There's nothing there. Shut up, move on. And I don't really go for that. I'm not anything when it comes. All I am is somebody who's curious about the world and life and everything. And I'm willing to soak it all in. And I don't really come to any conclusions, and atheism is a conclusion, right? So I haven't even come to that conclusion, but I'm more about, like you said earlier, we can all keep learning. So I just want to be exposed to ideas, and I'm not afraid of being overtaken because I know that I can trust myself as a thinker, and I can be exposed to things. It doesn't mean I'm going to fall for every idea. I can sift through them,
I'm not afraid to hear something new or even something contrary to what I think I believe.
I want to. I seek it out to a certain degree. Right. As long as people aren't going to yell at me. I don't want that.
All right. Let's get to our final segment as we are winding down. This segment or section is, what are you listening to? So important for us in radio, but Walt, we'll go to you first. What are you listening to?
Well, as usual, I'm listening to Radio Labyrinth, which Tim Andrews and some of Eric's other co-hosts host, and that's always great. They are kind of winding down their season as well, but you definitely want to catch up on Radio Labyrinth. And Tim, of course, is awesome and always entertaining. This week, Mark Maron interviewed Benedict Cumberbatch, who I find to be one of the better actors working today. It's episode 1284 of his podcast, and Mark is usually really good. He's kind of an unorthodox style, but his interviews are pretty good, and he's got several that I've really enjoyed. And Benedict Cumberbatch is a great.
I'm definitely gonna check that one out.
Yeah, and I've met Cumberbatch before, and just a fantastic person. So check that one out. And then I had forgotten, somebody mentioned this to me this week, that I was actually a guest on the Dirty Harry Minute back in March, and it was two guys from Australia and me talking about the movie Sudden Impact, and we just turned the movie on and did audio commentary. So that's the Dirty Harry Minute from their March 15th episode of Sudden Impact, one of my favorite Dirty Harry movies. So you never go wrong with Dirty Harry. Well, you can go wrong with that movie, but for the most part, you can't go wrong with Dirty Harry. And that was a fun episode. So check that out if you get some time.
Awesome. I'll go very quickly here so we can keep ourselves in check. My friends across the pond, 60MW, they have a podcast that used to be called 60 Minutes With, but they kept getting too much hate mail from folks watching 60 Minutes, the CBS show, thinking that was them. So they just called themselves 60MW. Really fun British podcast that does mostly about movies, video games, culture, and then interviews of either movie people or musicians. Really, really cool. The Time Bandit Minute that came out just recently. I was on episodes 4, 5, and 6. That's just starting, so you can get caught up. And the only other thing I'm listening to now, you know me, Walt, we love the holidays. Absolutely. I am playing Christmas music nonstop. I would highly suggest for you Sirius XM fans, the Holly channel is really cool. Mix of classic and up-to-date new covers. It's a really good mix of holiday Christmas music. So, Eric?
Well, for me, obviously, I'm listening to the entire Beatles catalog because I'm knee deep in that.
Yes.
But on the podcast front, I can't think of things but on the YouTube podcast kind of thing, I've alluded to it a couple of times, but I'm really into the whole did Shakespeare write all this stuff? So I'm listening to a lot of like pros and cons and evidence about that. So it's less of it being one show. It's more like a topic. And so lately I've been going into that topic because I find it fascinating. And then sometimes I think, oh, he obviously wrote it. And then I'm like, oh, wow, I don't know. Maybe he didn't. So it's something I can't resolve myself. So, but I do want to end by saying that there is a Gene Wilder aspect to the show, obviously, because it's named his name is in the name of the show, and I just wanted you to know that I don't know a lot about Gene Wilder, but when obviously the producers I know, and that was great. I did not like Willy Wonka when I was a kid because I didn't like musicals. But when I remember one of the great memories is going to the theater with my family. We didn't do this very often. Next time I come on, I can get away from politics. I can tell you about my life, an interesting family life growing up. Yes. But we went, one of the few times that we went to the movie theater together was to see Silver Streak. So that would have been what, 76, 75, somewhere in 75, somewhere there. And it was so good. I have no idea as an adult if I went back, if I would like it or not. But I remember
I think you would.
Gene Wilder, Richard Pryor, and I just remembered just loving that. First of all, the fact that they were swearing and I was allowed to be in the theater was amazing. I just remember really, 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 really loving that movie. So that's probably my favorite. Well, Young Frankenstein, obviously, is a great film as well. But that's my Gene. I wanted to have one Gene Wilder moment, and that was my Gene Wilder moment. Now, the people who wrote Silver Streak, didn't they write a couple of good movies? Didn't they write Foul Play? The one with Chevy Chase, same kind of thing. They would do these comedy, mystery kind of mashups. And I don't know I think that was the same producers or writers who wrote these things. But it did lead me to being a little bit older, some years later, spending my own money and being really disappointed with Stir Crazy.
You saw the beginning of what would be 4 films between Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor. I thought 3 of the 4 are really good. The 4th one, it's still Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder, but it's not the same Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder.
Was that the one? Was it anything? Something in the title?
No, it's Another You. Is that what it is?
Another You. Yeah. I saw Richard Pryor in an interview once, and he said that on that set he started having the cognitive problems, like thinking that he was walking forward, but he was actually walking backward, kind of thing. So the fact I never saw that movie, but the fact that they could somehow wrap that into some sort of narrative was probably a heroic achievement. What was the third one?
The third one was Hear No Evil, See No Evil.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I never saw that.
Yeah,
it's actually really funny.
Yeah,
it was the first film after Richard Pryor got clean that they did together, and I still like it. But I think probably because I love Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor, I'm willing to forgive the things that may be thought of as bad. I think it's great because you got one guy who's deaf and one guy who's blind, and they both get caught up in a intrigue.
I love Richard Pryor, man. I'm just a huge Richard Pryor. The comedy. We just lost Norm Macdonald, and he had that. Chappelle has some of it. It's what we started this conversation talking about, the human condition. Really having material that resonates, that goes marrow deep. And to me, Richard Pryor was not only the funniest person alive, but he was almost a reporter, like from his world and his experience. Sometimes he'd say things that would upset me. Sometimes he would say things that I didn't agree with, but I always just accepted it that he's reporting to me from the world, the life that he's lived, which was a very messed up life and a very messed up childhood. And I still think that first Richard Pryor movie where he's wearing the red shirt, the live, sometimes it's called Wanted. I saw it in the theater in the late 70s, but he's wearing a red kind of like satiny shirt in it. I still think that's the greatest example of captured stand-up comedy. You go to see stand-ups, and you know how stand-ups work. They open with one of their best jokes. They make sure one of their best things in the middle, and then they end with their best joke, right? You want to walk off that first Richard Pryor live movie. Every single joke is a walk off the stage.
Wow.
You could end the show with that joke. I think it's just, he became, so much stand-up comedy is just observation and this, that, but man, Richard would live it. He'd become the character. There's one point he's talking about losing his mind, shooting his car, and he starts taking on the persona of the tires as they're deflating, like, like that was, and then and he goes, I shot the engine block. The engine said, "Fuck." It's like you would take on. You just don't get that kind of thing. That kind
the
of
storytelling element.
Yeah, raconteur. Absolutely.
Yeah. I've always been drawn to the comedians that can do that, especially if 60 minutes later they somehow circle it back around and you realize, oh crap, this all ties back together.
And comedy now is like the stuff that sometimes I'll watch something on Netflix. It's all identity. It's all I'm this. It's all memoirish and autobiographical. And it's like, I don't care about you. I mean, I cared about Richard Pryor because he was so damn good. He made me care. But I don't want to just know about, oh, you're a this and that American and this has been your experience.
Some 24-year-old telling me how his life is.
Yeah. I mean, make me laugh. That's why I miss Norm Macdonald so much. It was all about the laugh. It was all about the punchline. That was the particular art of it, not this expressionist. I don't care. We got to go, but there was one I'll check them out. There was one where I thought, okay, this might be interesting. So this guy's going back to play a bar in Alabama. His mom was in a band in the 70s or 80s. They played there. Okay, this is kind of interesting, sort of documentary-like. And then once he started doing the comedy, it was like me, I, my feelings, my experience. It's boring to me. I don't know. Maybe if I was 25, I'd find it enlightening. I don't know, but it's too bad. The Richard Pryors, the Beatles, Marvin Gaye, those days are gone, man. They were wonderful and they were special, and they'll never happen again. I guess that's what makes them more special. I hear these songs now that are big, BTS. And it's like, what the hell? And people are acting like they're good. That's what annoys me. It's like, I get it that 14-year-olds like them, but I mean, but music critics are acting like, oh no, they're good. What? It's like 7 people. They don't play an instrument.
This is that fine line all three of us walk. Are we really that out of touch, or did we really have the greatest stuff only in our generation? And I keep wanting to say, there's got to be some good stuff still to come because there was good stuff in every generation, but am I stuck? And I don't want to be stuck.
Certainly not producing stuff that will be around in 50 years. Put it that way. Who's the 32-year-old director that's the equivalent of Martin Scorsese or Coppola? We came out of a generation that had Scorsese, Coppola, Spielberg, Friedkin. Just amazing.
Right.
I don't think that generation was necessarily the best. It resonated with us the most. I just think that starting in about 1915 or 1920, where you had this electronic equipment that could capture performance, I just think there have been a lot of great stuff since then. And then you slam into the 1990s and things just kind of die by about 96 or 97. And coincidentally, that was the rise of the internet. I'm not blaming the internet, but coincidentally, kind of happened at the same time, and you get these short attention spans, and so I don't think that we were the best. I think that we saw the last of the greatness. That's what I think.
Yeah,
I stay positive. There are Christopher Nolans out there. There's the Taika Waititis out there. There may not be as many as when we grew up as auteurs or people that could just always churn out a hit, but there are still some, and I still have hope that
Christopher Nolan's not that young.
No, he's not. But he's fantastic.
But he's fantastic. Oh, he's one of the only. I will go to movie theaters to see his movies.
I go to see for the director more than the cast.
Even though Tenet made no sense, I still enjoyed it.
Dude, we're gonna have a whole episode. I love Tenet, and only because I watched it like 3 times. I go, holy shit! It's the first time travel movie where there's 17 different timelines and everyone's on a different one, and they're all intersecting.
Could I ask you one question? Because I only saw it once. At the end,
need to see it more than
when
once.
They're doing the pincer movement. They're all
the
shooting.
Temporal pincer. Yes.
Is anyone shooting back?
No, that's the beauty of it.
What is happening? What are they doing? What is? We'll do it.
It's the other team
next year, season 5.
Just remember this: there's one team that already did it, and so the other team that's now catching up is shooting at what the other team was already shooting at.
Yeah, but
which means they were shooting at each other.
But no,
they were shooting at each other.
But who's the other side? Who's shooting back?
That's Okay, we're gonna have to have a whole episode breaking down Tenet.
And
Okay,
also,
by the time you come back, I'll watch Tenet and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, Walt's never seen it, so he doesn't even know what the hell we're talking about.
Well, we love Nolan, but we can agree on the fact that as great as he is, well, that sounds sometimes. If you're going to have a plot that's that difficult to follow, I need to be able to hear what people are saying, and that's the beginning of when we get together in season 5.
There we go. What all I can tell you is when you watch it a second time, put your closed captioning on. That'll help.
Okay. But I shouldn't have to. We can agree that you shouldn't have to do that.
You should not have to.
All right.
Yeah. Now, I did. This is crazy. We're going an extra 2 seconds here. I can say this. I convinced my wife to upgrade our home stereo to an Atmos Dolby surround because I love the movie theater. So I can hear everything in Tenet, and I still know where the dialogue drops. I'm like, that should not be that low right now because there's a lot of shit I got to listen.
Why doesn't he care about that? That's for as meticulous as everything else is, and the timelines. How does that fall through the cracks? That's weird.
And this is where I have a problem. But you know what? He's Christopher Nolan. Who am I to argue? He said, "Look, if you go see it in IMAX, you'd hear everything." Well, I can't go to an IMAX theater. Right. I don't have one within 20 miles.
I saw it on IMAX, and I did not hear everything.
And you still couldn't hear.
That's not true. I saw it on IMAX because I always see Nolan movies at the Gwinnett place on IMAX.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Tenet was something where he was trying to say, it's not about the story, it's about the impression, which is really weird because as a movie audience, we want the story, not the impression. If it makes an impression, that's great. Yeah. And it's almost like he wanted to flip it on its head on purpose.
Yeah. Well, and what's his name? What's Denzel's son's name? He was fantastic.
He was, freaking
John
awesome.
David Washington or something like that. He was fantastic. I'd never seen him in anything before. And I didn't know he was Denzel Washington's son. Denzel makes a bad movie good. I mean, Denzel is like, if I can watch a bad movie with Denzel, and when I watched Tenet, I did not know that he was Denzel's son, but somebody needs to find some sort of action character that he plays, because he was fantastic at that element of
awesome.
It. Absolutely.
It was awesome.
All right.
So I would highly suggest watching it again. Before we let you go, Eric, because we always got to do this very quickly, a little housekeeping. Walt, I'm going to let you power through this very quick for our audience that's hung out with us and the head of the Von Haessler Doctrine. How do people learn a little bit more about our show? Because they may be stumbling upon this episode for the very first time.
If you have stumbled on us the first time, the best place to find out a little bit more about Alan and I is at our website at thewilderride.com. You'll find our bios, our guest lists, past things that we've worked on and done, and some stuff that we've guested on that you might be interested in as well. And you can also check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/thewilderride. You'll want to follow us there and then join our listeners group, which has all kinds of fun stuff about entertainment, our show, and other things. And no politics, no nothing, just lighthearted good stuff to help you through your week. So that's us, facebook.com/thewilderride.
We're also on Twitter and Instagram, also The Wilder Ride, just trying to help promote the show. It's social media. Yeah, we talked about it earlier. It may suck, but you know what? You got to kind of embrace it. It's what everybody uses. So if you have a chance, like and review and share it. Just take a second. No matter what, you're listening to the Von Haessler Doctrine, you're listening to us, whoever's podcast, there's a share button. Put it on your social media. Help us all out, grow our audience. Until next week, our final episode, we are going to have Brad Stevens join us for a holiday movie special. We're going to break format. We did it with Autumn Fisher with Halloween movies. We're going to do it with Brad Stevens with Christmas movies to wrap up our 4th season. But to come back and learn about all of it and the movies we love, you got to come back next week for the last edition of this season 4 Wilder Ride. Eric, thank you so much for being here, buddy. That was awesome.
Well, thanks. I'm sorry it got political. Next time, no politics, and then we end with the roundtable discussion of Tenet.
No, look, it didn't get political. You brushed alongside talking politics without getting political.
Yeah, we didn't get into my weird life, though. I think you wanted to, and that would have been a fun place to go.
I did.
We'll go there next time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just thrilled to have you, and I hope you had a good time because it felt like you did.
I did. I enjoyed the hell out of it.
Merry Christmas. I'll be listening to you from now to the end of the year, but break a leg every day. I love this.
Thanks for having me. Merry Christmas.
Like wild train, roll right off your track. Like wild train, roll right off your track.
Watch it.